Hey guys and welcome back to my channel. This is part 5 of What If Naruto was the Superhuman Maelstrom in Marvel. Before we begin, don't forget to like, share and subscribe, and also go and support the author, link in description. He ran and ran right after the boss was about to deliver a powerful punch to the boy who stole the Kyuubi from his body back when they battled at Konoha's outskirts. He didn't even look back when he heard the explosion and kept on going towards the direction that had been given to them by Takigaku's leader after much coercion from the boss's side. It didn't take much for the village to give up their Jinchuriki. After all, they were wary of her because of their incapability to exert absolute control over her, and her behavior didn't help matters as she constantly disregarded their attempts to exert control, and they just knew that she was very much capable of destroying the whole village on a whim. They also received the information that the Jinchuriki was an enigma to the village that she's supposed to be loyal to. At times, they weren't even sure that she believed anyone in the village, or that she was loyal. Considering the treatment you've given her, should it be that much of a surprise for you? Was his unspoken thoughts, because it was just logical for a human to be disloyal if he didn't feel appreciated or constantly belittled by his superiors or colleagues. People are idiots, and now that he knew, especially those in Takigaku, it made him wonder how the hell that village had sustained itself all these years. Well, the answer to that was easy. After all, Takigaku couldn't even hope to challenge any of the 5 great villages, and so it made them somewhat subservient, making them dependent on the trades from other villages. However, despite the fact that they were able to somehow acquire a biju and seal it into someone, they did not understand a lot of things about Jinchuriki, and that was their fatal flaw, as they were not able to fully realize the full potential of a Jinchuriki. So it was to no surprise that they gave her location to them without too much coercion, which was no problem for him since it made everything easier to do. That is until that annoying boy got to them again somehow. This was supposed to be his redemption after failing Dana during the mission to Konoha. He was supposed to completely decimate the village during his distract and destruct objective, but instead, he was thwarted by a boy who had similar powers as the Dana. While he did succeed on the distraction part, the complete destruction of the village part was pretty much a complete bust, and despite Dana's assurance that it was alright because their main objective was fulfilled, it really bothered him that he failed Dana. So it really got to his nerve that the boy was once again got himself in the way of Dana's plan. That, and the fact that he was as powerful as Dana, which put the boy above him in terms of power level, and that was why he was somewhat content in leaving the boy to be taken care of by the boss. However, he didn't notice that the boy didn't come alone. He stopped when someone landed in front of him, a person coated with some kind of purple aura that acted as a protective layer that allowed her to create a small crater when she landed. It was one Satsuki Uchiha. Her short hair flared wildly as she shot a defiant, furious look on him, and her energy field pulsed as her emotion was barely restrained from blowing. Even as he took a step back, he couldn't help contain his talkative nature and remarked with a loud voice, "Who boy? Got myself another scary one. Man, I know I deserve this somewhat, but how many of you are there?" Her expression didn't change one bit as her scowl was still in place, and the intensity of her sharp gaze made him flinch. "You're quite a chatterbox for a mass murderer. But I guess that's lunacy for you." Without any more quips, she extended her hand and created a beam of destructive energy to the mutated man. He barely avoided it by removing the slightly hindering cloak and leapt out of the way, leaving him with only a pair of black trousers, showing his now seal-less white skin. The man grinned as he responded with an attack of his own. His right hand was suddenly engulfed with an orange-colored fire-like energy that he threw like a ball towards her. "Take that." She responded with deflecting the attack using her energy field to create a solid construct, a circular shield that reflected the energy ball shot by the man away from her and into a nearby tree. The result was a medium-sized explosion that engulfed the tree that it hit in the area 2 meters from the tree. Satsuki looked at the sight of the burnt tree in shock for a split second before she refocused her mind on the battle and leapt back from the man who charged at her with his fists blazing. After his initial attack was evaded, he jumped towards Satsuki using his energy to augment the height of his leap. He cocked back his right fist just as he was about to close in on Satsuki, but she retaliated by performing an upward kick. Using her feet that was clad in her personal energy field, she exploded the energy on impact and disoriented the mutated men, and she finished it with an enhanced energy beam that she created through combining two energy beams that she shot from both of her palms. The explosive effect created by that attack brought the mutated man down to the hard ground below in a violent fashion, but Satsuki was not finished. She extended both of her hands towards the direction of the downed mutant and released several energy beams towards him, creating numerous explosion that was centered on the chalk-white-skinned man. Then came another orange energy ball out of the smoke which she failed to completely avoid, as it managed to graze her right on the outer edge her energy aura. The energy ball created another explosion, but that was not Satsuki's main concern as the man suddenly dashed out of the smoke despite his visible injuries and stood on his person with his fists blazing and his teeth shown as he was literally grinning from ear to ear. He laughed maniacally as he charged towards Satsuki who got into a combat stance. Her eyes were filled with resolve instead of fear and indecisiveness. When he was but a few feet away from punching her with his energy-coated fists, she performed an upward punch that should have missed him completely. If it weren't for a 7 feet long disembodied right arm made out of her energy to materialize right below him and mimicking Satsuki's arm's movement, sending the man flying with his blood coming out from his mouth as the solid energy construct hit him right below his chin. She then followed that by creating a giant left arm using her energy and punched the mutated man mid-air towards the nearby forest with such a force that it actually made him crash and destroy all the trees that he hit. The silence that followed was quite unnerving. As the man was lying on his back far from where Satsuki was to the point where she couldn't see him clearly, she prepared for the inevitable continuation that could come at any moment by keeping the energy arms at her side and her aura covering her body. Then the silence was broken when a flame-clad giant whip made from his energy made its way towards her from where the man was. The sight made Satsuki instinctively change the energy arms to a large circular shield that she placed between her and the energy whip. It exploded when it impacted with her shield, making her wince at the sheer force of the explosion. She felt the purple energy shield flickering as his energy was destructive enough to inflict an adverse effect on her energy field. Then she saw the man approaching her at breakneck speed as he materialized another energy whip on his left hand and swung it at her. This time, she turned her shield back into a pair of giant arms, one of which she used to catch the whip. Take this. And the other she used to pummel the man into the ground as she leapt away from him. Afterwards, she focused and created two pairs of construct that looked like a pair of armored boots and gloves that could burst out continuous, highly concentrated streams of fire from a pair of holes on the soles of the boots and the palms of the gloves to keep herself floating, a design which she happened to steal from Shiho's notes that was lying around when she and Naruto were back at the base. She had a thought that it would come in handy someday, so she memorized the design and its hypothetical schematics, and with that, she was able to craft it using her energy field. Her assumption turned out to be proven true rather quickly, as the mutated man flew up from the dusts of the crater that she had created when she pummeled him, his flight granted by coating his palms and feet with his energy and using the same method that Satsuki was using, except without the energy constructs. CK. How versatile is this guy's power exactly? Satsuki wondered in slight frustration as she flew away with the mutated man right behind her. Her mind was trying to find a satisfying way to end this fight. Ooh. Cat and mouse fight. Huh. Okay then, I'll play along, you not so scary after all, lady. He then released several bolts of energy with punching motions that he directed at her as they flew. She then responded by slightly turning her body to face him and release numerous bolts of her own energy in retaliation. Some of their energy bolts hit each other, some of them missed completely from their intended target and the opposing energy bolts, some of them grazed either two of them a little bit, some of them hit something else instead of their supposed target, but due to their seemingly endless reservoir of energy, the sight, had someone else were to witness it, was spectacular. It was as if the stars were declaring war upon each other and shot themselves to one another in an attempt to defeat their respective adversaries. Even 100 fireworks would not be able to match the sight that was made by the intensity of this battle. Meanwhile, down below on the ground, Jiraiya, Tsunade and Shizune kept on moving towards the location of the battle above them. They kept their gaze slightly upwards, towards the site of the aerial battle that was happening between Satsuki and the mutated man. So what's the plan, Jiraiya? It looks like the girl can handle herself pretty well. Tsunade remarked. rather impressed by how Satsuki was handling her battle and the spectacle that it created. Even though she had never seen an aerial combat before, Tsunade could see what the girl was doing, which was to adopt a hit-and-run tactic combining it with a battle of attrition, both of which were familiar to her. It was just the way that they applied it with their powers that made it look somewhat unfamiliar to her at first glance. Yeah. Still, I didn't know that she could do that though. Jiraiya said as he rubbed his chin. I suppose we'll keep watch. If it looks like she's in trouble then we'll jump in. Good plan. Tsunade remarked as they stopped at a tree branch located a few hundred meters away from the battle. Who do you reckon those mutated men are, Jiraiya? Have you heard of them? Only from one source. Hiruzen-sensei. Answered Jiraiya. 4 of those men were the ones responsible for Kyuubi's attack in Konoha. They masqueraded as a part of Kumogakure's shinobi that was sent to discuss a more solid peace treaty after the action of their shinobi a couple of years ago where they kidnapped the Hyuga clan's young heiress. Ah, the Hyuga affair. Tsunade remarked. Jiraiya grinned at that and gave her a remark in return, still keeping your ears to the ground sometimes, huh? He asked rhetorically. Anyway, 4 of the Kumo shinobi turned out to be the man-like creatures that looked similar to the one we have seen, except the ones that Sensei described are not as muscular as the one who is fighting with Naruto right now. How can they be involved with the Kyuubi? Asked the curious Shizune. I mean, a method to control a Biju is for someone to be a Jinchuriki. Correct, Shizune. Jiraiya said, and somehow, they managed to capture the Kyuubi and tether it into the body of one of those men, making him a Jinchuriki. The carrier was the one who brought the Kyuubi into the doorstep, and the initiator of the attack. The hospital was their first target, I assume. Tsunade asked after a moment of silence, connecting the dots between Jiraiya's statement about the waning number of medic nin and the Kyuubi attack. Jiraiya nodded. Yes. He answered, and that's where the boy lost his adopted mother. Tsunade's eyes widened and she tightly crossed her arms after she heard that answer. Who was she? She asked in a soft voice. Her name was Taji Kanzaki. She was the medic nin who was chosen to help Kushina gave birth to him, and Sensei gave the custody over Naruto to her after Minato's death. Answered Jiraiya. She then frowned as she asked the question that pierced deeply into Jiraiya's heart, aren't you his godfather? She asked, why would Sensei give him to another person instead of you? At this, Jiraiya could only smile in a somber fashion and answered, you know what kind of man I am, right, Tsunade Haim. Sensei made that decision with the best intention at heart. And I believe that his decision was right in more ways than one. Tsunade knew what kind of man Jiraiya was. A pervert, a lecher, a womanizer. But despite all his faults, he was nevertheless kind, loyal, and trustworthy. However, in addition to that, he was also a free-spirited man, and in a way, it was both one of his faults as much as it was one of his redeeming qualities. She knew that he was not a man fit to be a father. Or at least, he did not consider himself as a man fit to be a father in any form considering his nature. So his declination was something that she could understand. After all, if she were in the same position as he was, she would have many doubts in her capabilities as well. Her gaze softened as she said to him, don't be so hard on yourself, Jiraiya. Minato trusted you for a reason. If the circumstances allowed you to perform your godfatherly duties, I'm sure you would have done a satisfying job. Jiraiya's smile did not change, indicating that he did not really believe in himself as much as Tsunade believed in him. That's very kind of you, Tsunade Haim. He said. Perhaps. I might try to actually fulfill that role once this is over. Maybe. Still, with his maturity, I'm not sure if I actually need to be his godfather anymore, hahaha. He ended it with a sheepish smile. Tsunade and Shizune smiled sadly at Jiraiya's attitude. He had always been fond, perhaps too fond to cast himself in a less than positive light combined with a bit of self-deprecating humor that was simply far from the truth that those close to him could see. Further conversations were halted when Jiraiya cleared his throat and said, anyway, we need to pay attention on the battle. If they move too far away, we need to quickly follow them. Looking upwards to the location of the battle, each of them were feasting their eyes upon the sight that the two combatants were creating. Jiraiya, outside of the boy and the girl, how many of these superhumans are there? Including them, there are 8 known superhumans. He emphasized on the known part, each with their distinctive abilities. And the boy is the strongest, I assume. Jiraiya smirked and answered. That goes without saying. When Naruto flew out to get to the giant which he had sent flying for at least 100 meters away from where he punched him, he didn't expect for the man to retaliate even before he could reach him. Midway to the giant's location, he was caught off guard when the giant jumped towards him mid-flight and caught his neck within the grasp of his gigantic right hand. Carried by the force of his powerful jump, Naruto was brought back to a location near the entrance to Takigakure. When both of them landed, their landing created a crater and a deafening booming noise. Naruto was pressured by the giant's hand as he forced him to remain on his back on the ground. Before he could try and push it, the giant pummeled his head several times using his free hand, creating small earthquakes every time he did so. Before his head was completely buried in the crater that was created with the giant's punches, Naruto punched the arm that was holding him on the ground with all his might, and he ended up burying his fist into the giant's flesh. The giant's wince was enough of an opening for the blonde as he pulled his fist from the giant's arm and delivered an uppercut to the giant's chin that sent the giant flying upwards for at least 100 meters high. Naruto flew up to meet the giant before gravity could pull him back down to the ground and pulled out every last bits of his energy to deliver a powerful sideward kick that created a reverberating quake that one could mistakenly thought as a giant-sized explosion. The side kick not only cracked the giant's bones, it also slightly caved the side of his abdomen inward and sent him flying at least twice the speed of sound. Following the powerful kick, Naruto flew towards the flying giant with an even faster flying velocity to catch up to him, which he did in the span of 1.5 seconds. He mimicked what the giant did to him and tightly grasped the giant's neck and roughly pushed him downwards and into the ground below. Like an asteroid that fell from the sky, the impact of their drop created a massive shockwave that in turn gave birth to a desolate crater as the shockwave uprooted every nearby tree in a violent fashion and leaving only the imploded circle of their crash at the fertile ground. On the center of the crater was Naruto and the battered giant that he held by his neck. He lifted him up and cocked his fist back in an attempt to continue his assault, but he was stopped when the giant grabbed his fist midway, creating a small quake due to his strength and the giant's durability. Naruto defiantly stared at the giant, who merely looked at him with a disinterested gaze despite his injuries. He then opened his mouth, and suddenly, the base of his throat produced glowing veins, red in color that seemed to crawl towards his mouth. Then to Naruto's surprise, the giant breathed out a stream of flame of intense heat directed at his head. Though the giant did know that Naruto was practically immune from such attack, he did so with the purpose of catching him by surprise and blinding him with the heat so that the grip that he had on his neck would be lessened. He succeeded. Naruto's grip went slack for a little bit and he pulled his hand that he used to block his punch in order to pull it back to retaliate to his assault. However, Naruto blew out a powerful gale from his mouth, forcing the fire to go back into the giant's body and in turn, catching him by surprise. The slight choking that the giant experienced was enough for Naruto to retaliate. Freed from the flames that had singed him slightly, he focused the energy within him to his eyes and released them in the form of 2 bright, blue-colored destructive energy beams directed at the giant's chest. The energy beams possessed huge kinetic and thermal force that pushed the giant 110 meters away and burning through the skin and muscle of his chest due to the beams' intense heat. Deep beneath his psyche, the Biju known as Kyuubi was deeply impressed by Naruto's unforgiving, merciless and brutal fighting style. He could feel the boy's hatred and anger flowing through him, but they were refined, focused, and he let bits of it out in a proper fashion that made him more like an intensely angered warrior instead of a raving, screaming madman. The beast continued to watch on as Naruto flew towards the location where he had sent the giant to with his back slightly upwards, and he saw as the giant emerged just before Naruto could reach him, he sidestepped to the left slightly and charged back with a lariat aimed at his neck. The Kyuubi noticed that the giant's speed seemed to be augmented somehow as he managed to land the lariat right on his intended target. But Naruto only budged slightly and he didn't fall due to the force, and his head was not disconnected despite the massive amount of physical force behind the attack. In fact, as his neck was being held at bay by the giant's right bicep, he glared defiantly at the giant before he delivered a powerful knee kick right at the white giant's abdomen. The giant buckled slightly at the sheer weight behind the attack, but he struggled to remain standing in the same position, and his attempt did not succeed as he was pushed several meters backwards by its force. If his innards were not very durable, they would have exploded a long time ago, but still, the relentless attacks had given a significant amount of physical pain on the giant. Inside Naruto's mind, the Kyuubi decided to help Naruto along in an attempt to give the first of many comeuppance to come for the giant's master, the fake Madara. After what he did to him and his previous host, the Kyuubi was more than willing to do anything to get back big time at the fucker. The beast channeled his energy to the boy's body, and within the span of 2 seconds, he was enveloped in a red chakra aura that seemed to boil in a similar way to how a boiled water produced many bubbles because of the fire's intense heat. However, it appeared as if Naruto did not notice this at first, until he pulled his right arm back and struck the man's head with a mean uppercut. The aura exuded intense heat that rivaled the temperature of his energy beam, and when it touched the giant's skin, it burned him so fast that it only required a total amount of a half second to be affected by the aura. The moment Naruto's fist touched the giant's head and the moment where he was sent flying upwards were separated only by 0.8 seconds, and the effect that Kyuubi's aura gave was no doubt felt by the giant. Naruto flew up to meet the giant again, but he stopped as he looked at his hands coated in Kyuubi's aura. "What is this?" he asked the beast within him. "What did you do to me?" His tone was not accusatory, but nevertheless firm, stern, and a bit demanding. "A bit of an incentive to end the fight quicker, Kit," was the beast's answer. "I have a beef with these creatures, master, so let's just say that I'm willing to help you fight these bastards to hurt him." Naruto smiled as he looked up towards the giant who's beginning to fall down to earth. "Your help is appreciated, Kyuubi." Then he flew up, fully intent to continue the battle and bring it to an end. Tsunade's attention was diverted from the Uchiha's fight into Naruto's fight from afar. She noticed that they have moved quite a few miles away, but she could still see the ripples on the air that they were creating, even from their position. She then looked back towards the Uchiha girl's battle, and she felt as if she were insignificant despite her own impressive abilities. While she certainly had the strength and speed along with the capability to heal almost any injuries, she lacked the versatility that these two kids had with their powers. Seeing this new generation of exceptionally powered people in action left an impression that would last in Tsunade. The sight of Satsuki Uchiha and Naruto fighting reminded her of her past battle alongside her teammates that made the moniker Sanin hold a powerful effect in the world of shinobi, which was their fight with the one called Hanzo of the Salamander from Omegakure. "Tsunade Haim," Jiraiya said to her as their eyes were locked to what was going on above them. "Yeah. Quote. Was this what other shinobi feel when they saw us in battle during the war? Being a mere spectator in a battle gave a different feeling to a battle compared to being a participant. Usually, this position would give one a feeling of awe, as the separation from the seats and the stage allowed them to be emotionally distant for the plight of the combatants and make their mind focused on the spectacle of the battle itself. This was a feeling that neither Jiraiya nor Tsunade ever felt before. It was new, fresh, and somewhat scary. "I don't know," replied Tsunade with a faint smile. "Whether it actually is or not, there's one thing that's certain." The hermit looked at his oldest friend and asked, "What?" "These two. They're really promising." Satsuki charged at the super-powered man with her right leg extended backwards and her left leg folded. She performed repeated punches directed at the man, releasing her energy from her fists that was formed into purple-colored fireballs similar to the Great Fireball technique. The man clad in flame-like energy avoided few of them. A lot of the purple flame managed to hit him and direly affected him due to the fires having a far more concentrated destructive property compared to a normal fire and his lesser durability. Both of them were then separated by an empty space as wide as 20 feet. He pulled his fist back and Satsuki did the same. Then they thrust their fists forward and let out two massive streams of fire-like energy that were equally powerful to stall the progress of one another and in the process, holding back the casters from moving forward. The conflicting energies were at a war with one another, and the sight that it made was so bright that despite it was daytime, the battle of the two streams of energy produced a source of light blinding enough for the spectators of the battle. Their extended hands kept on giving out streams of their respective energies, and at first, it seemed that the battle was doomed to remain at a stalemate, But after a moment, the odds of the battle began to tip over to Satsuki as the stream of purple flame began to win over the orange one. As Satsuki's flame began to win over his own, the mutated man decided to be smart and flee before it could hit him. The moment the purple flame consumed his red one, he was already away, using his energy to propel himself through the air and to the relative safety of the area outside of her attack. The fireball created by Satsuki landed on the ground below, and the subsequent explosion was so massive that it nearly reached to the height of Satsuki's location, missing her by the margin of 3 meters. God damn it, this lady is dangerous, was the thought of the mutated man as he flew away, certain that the enemy that he mentioned was right behind him, following closely with the intent to kill. This mission is supposed to be simple. At least before their arrival. Hopefully the Jinchuriki doesn't have any special powers too. Crap. I jinxed it, didn't I? Speaking of which. Ah, they're so close, Shumei. Should I interfere? Would you judge me badly if I decided to? Fu asked the beast within her. It is your choice on what would happen next, Fu. Whatever the consequences will be, all of it will fall only on you. Shumei answered, but remember, if you fall, I will also fall. So let me hear your plan first. It's simple, I just use my power to aid that girl in defeating that strange-looking man. Was her answer, and afterwards, find out what they want. I have a bad feeling every time I see that white-skinned man, I don't like him. He might be looking for me before the girl and the man with the strange outfit interfered and impeding their progress. Shumei could be heard sighing through their link, it is likely. However, are you sure you are strong enough? Her response was to let out her energy in a way that made her skin lit up in a green-colored light that seemed to be coursing through her veins. Thanks to you, I am. She heard the beast within her chuckling in amusement, then let's go kid. Satsuki knew that the battle of attrition that she had been waging with the mutated man was tilted in her favor. The mutated man might have a superpower that could match her own, but he did not have a firm grasp on the ability to manipulate the energy the way she could. However, he was able to evade her so proficiently because of how he was more used to flight than she was. She had been improvising ever since she used the designs of the armored gloves and boots that Shiho had drawn forth with her power. Despite the man's reckless nature, he could be cautious when the situation called for it. Frustrating as it was the thing that had been prolonging this battle, and the one thing that she could do to shorten the battle was to create a large construct to cage the man within and fight him inside it, but wait a minute, there was something else that she could use with such a construct besides keeping him inside it and fight him. Damn it, why didn't I think of that sooner? She mentally berated herself as she increased her speed, fully intent to severely weaken the man before she could deliver the final blow that she just thought of. However, the speed of his flight was much faster compared to his performance before, indicating that he had no desire to fight any longer. However, his flight route was rather chaotic and his sight seemed to be unfocused as he kept on looking at the area surrounding him as if he was looking for something. Could it be the Jinchuriki that they seek? Are they here? Satsuki asked to herself, not expecting to get an answer. But as it turned out, she was answered by the one whom these mutated men were seeking. At first, she thought she saw flashes of green light from below her, following the movement of her and the mutated man, which she initially chalked up to something that was not actually real. But then, the flash of the glowing green object turned out to be real as it jumped up from down below at breakneck speed and it was coming towards the direction of the flying mutated man. She saw as the object hit the man with its fists. The image of the moment was captured with her eyes, the moment where the young woman's fists that were extended upwards hit the mutated man's abdomen from below and sent him to greater height with the force of the punch that created a ripple similar to the ones Naruto created whenever he put a large amount of his power onto his hands and struck an object. Though it was smaller compared to the ones that Naruto was able to make, it was nevertheless powerful, enough to send the mutated man quite far away from their location and it actually concussed him so bad that he fell to the ground with a big thud, either because he got unconscious or because he was severely disoriented. Satsuki took a moment to look at the young woman who helped her, and she saw the green-haired, orange-eyed woman being covered in some kind of green aura that mimicked an insect's nest due to the way the wings beat so fast that it made buzzing noises and was unable to be properly seen in motion due to how fast they were beating. The stranger noticed Satsuki and she waved and said, "Hi. Sorry if you're offended with me butting in, but I have a reason to believe that that man might be looking for me. My name is Fu, strange looking eyes by the way." Ah. At first, Satsuki's lackluster response was made out of confusion, but after a moment, she recomposed herself and she managed to give out a more proper response. I'm Satsuki. Are you, by any chance, a Jinchuriki? At this, Fu's eyes narrowed as she scrutinized Satsuki with her gaze. For a second, there was silence, until she broke it by saying, "You're not in league with those strange men, but you're not looking for me too, are you? You're not some kind of rival of theirs that has the same cause, are you?" No, I am not. Satsuki answered as she shook her head. I also have some beef with the strange men, and that's why I'm fighting one of them. I do not have any ill intent towards you. Fu. Fu hummed for 3 seconds before she said, "Alright then, I decide to trust you, Satsuki. Let's continue kicking that man's ass, yeah?" She asked rhetorically before she flew towards the direction where she had punched the man into. Hey, wait damn it! Satsuki yelled as she quickly followed suit. When the three of them saw a glowing green object delivering a powerful flying punch to the man that Satsuki had been fighting, they knew that they were dealing with another one of these superhumans. But Jiraiya knew that there was something more to this one, as the aura that the new one was using was familiar to the drawing that his student had drawn in his notes when he examined Kushina's Jinchuriki ability in which she manifested the beast's power through a chakra aura, and this one looked quite similar to the Uzumaki, sans the red color of the aura and the similarity of its appearance to an insect instead of a fox. Connecting the proverbial dots led him to the conclusion that this one was the Jinchuriki of the Seven Tails who belonged to Takigakure. Inwardly, he was impressed by how in control the Jinchuriki appeared to be. After all, even Minato once said that his wife had some difficulty in controlling her Biju's power. And this one was able to use the energy of hers with relative ease, indicating remarkable familiarity with their Jinchuriki and an extensive experience with the beast within them. Maybe the difference in the aura color is caused by their more powerful connection. Jiraiya assumed as he turned towards Tsunade and Shizune, "Let's go. It seems that the fight is about to come to an end." As they leapt from one branch to another, Tsunade couldn't help but chuckle. "Jiraiya. Do you know that my medic nin self within me is actually raring to examine these superhumans? Gods. It's like I'm turning into him." Jiraiya knew whom she was talking about. Their former teammate who turned traitor, Orochimaru, whose desire to uncover and experiment the secrets of Shinobi's source of power led him into conducting inhuman experiments. He knew that she meant it as a joke, but he couldn't help but to be a bit stern when he said, "As long as your curiosity is still within the boundaries of what's acceptable, it doesn't mean that you're turning to him, Tsunade." Sensing his friend's serious tone reminded her that to him, Orochimaru's betrayal was something that pained him deeply, and she immediately said, "I know Jiraiya, I know. I didn't mean it that way." As the uncomfortable silence fell upon them, Shizune couldn't help but lament the fact that once again, a small rift was created because of Tsunade's remark that unwittingly reminded Jiraiya of the one they once called friend. Jiraiya-sama, Tsunade-sama only meant what she said as a jest. "Surely it's not something to be taken seriously?" she rhetorically asked, wanting to fix what her mentor had caused. Yet the silence remained. And Shizune was cowed into silence as they were making their way towards the location of the crash, recognizing that to Jiraiya, Orochimaru was quite a sensitive subject. Gods be damned. What the hell just hit me? 1 minute, he was flying away from the scary lady with all the power that he had at his beck and call, and the next minute, he felt a significant amount of physical pain from a flying attack made by a third party that he didn't even see due to how disoriented he became by their attack. To be honest, he felt as if he had been thrown into something from which there was no visible exit. First, there was the boy who absorbed the Kyuubi, then there was this scary lady whom he's beginning to think having an Uchiha blood within her considering the strange red eyes that she exhibited, then there was the unknown attacker who was powerful enough to inflict serious damage to him. Donna. Forgive me, but it seems that the odds are not in my favor. He thought to himself as he struggled to lift himself up. Then, he heard buzzing noises coming from above. Driven by instinct, he gathered his strength and moved away from his position, and 1.5 seconds later, something landed on the spot where he once was, and he groaned as his body was once again attacked by the stinging pain that came from his severely injured body. Before he could do anything, he was kicked by the one who landed. The attacker performed a powerful upward kick that right at his head which dislocated his jaw, severely disoriented him, and sent him flying for at least 4 meters high. He heard something before he even landed. Get out of the way, Fu. Fu. So that's the name of the guy, Fu. Wait, have I heard that name before? He was then encased in a purple energy sphere constructed by none other than Satsuki Uchiha, a sphere which had a diameter of 5 meters and riddled with hexagon pattern that imprisoned the man and placed him at Satsuki's mercy. The mutated man landed on the base of the sphere's interior, and Satsuki threateningly said, "It's over. Whoever you are not going to escape." Her red eyes then produced a tomo as she said, "This is where you will meet your end." As the sphere began to glow brightly, indicating that Satsuki was going to explode its interior, Fu then said, "Wait. Don't kill him that quickly." Though she halted the progress of the explosion, Satsuki was still more than willing to kill the mutated man after what one of his kin did to Konoha, and so she said, "What? Why?" She asked her. "Why don't we question him first? I want to be certain that he is sent to kill or do something bad to me." Fu pleaded with Satsuki. Satsuki's response was heated. "Look, if he is, then it would be a good thing to kill him now. And if he isn't, he and his master already did something bad to my village, and he might be the one responsible for the death of my boyfriend's mother, so either way, you win." "She's right, you know," Shumei remarked. "Either way, you lose nothing. Except maybe your need for certainty, which you can satisfy later anyway." Oh, alright. Do it if you're so inclined to. Fu said, realizing her mistake but not that willing to admit as much to her. Satsuki then increased her energy input, and then, the light within the sphere glowed brighter and brighter until it violently vibrated and flashed a blinding light that forced Fu and even Satsuki herself to shield their eyes as everything in the vicinity of the sphere's interior was utterly destroyed in a blast of energy that she had unleashed in the contained space. The explosion lasted for 4 seconds. The light remained for 2 seconds and it fully dimmed out in 2 seconds as well, and when the light died down, there was nothing within the sphere. Nothing. Not even ashes. Satsuki dispelled the sphere along with her armored gauntlets and boots, and then, she fell to her knees as sweat began to pour out from her skin as exhaustion began to affect her. "Exhaustion, huh?" Fu said as she walked over to Satsuki and patted her on the back. "I suppose that's the first time you ever done something that big. Don't worry, it's only temporary. I had the same experience when I used my power in the scale that I have never done before. Blacked out for 2 days. But the one to be blamed for that is Shumei, who gave me false assurance. You are never going to let that go, are you? What can I say? When one has a good memory, they tend to remember every little detail of what happened to them, so suck it up, Shumei," she mentally replied to the seven-tailed beast. "Anyway, are you in league with the strangely dressed man who is finishing his fight with the bigger white-skinned man? Speaking of which, you are also weirdly dressed, is this some sort of new fashion?" Naruto. She was talking about Naruto. "How did you know about him?" Fu responded by pointing to her eyes. "I saw him from afar, and I also found you with the same way. It's what my power allows me to do. That and what you have seen before, the aura. Though that is a joint effort of mine and Shumei's power interacting with each other." At first, Satsuki frowned out of confusion at the name that she spoke of. Whoever could this Shumei be, she wondered, but then, she connected the dots, and came with a conclusion that hit the bull's eye. "Is Shumei the Biju inside of you?" she asked. "Why yes." Fu answered in a rather chipper tone of voice, "He is the number 7. The confidant. The best friend that I made due to the circumstances that bound us together. He is a bit of a jerk sometimes though, especially prevalent during the first years we were bound together. Might I remind you of how you used to be before I took the liberty of actually teaching you proper etiquette and behavior? If you need the assistance of a demon to act properly, then you are not allowed to complain of how hard I was on you. You might have ended up as a worse person than this. Yeah, I get it. Pick on the time where the only relation that I have with other people are limited to glares and ostracization and forcing me to have you as the only one whom I could communicate freely to. I never get bored by that. See. See how well you transmit your sarcasm like that. Before I told you the concept, you weren't even able to know if people or a biju are being sarcastic or not. I may have been a jerk to you kid, but don't deny that I did not have a profound effect on your life besides the ostracization that the villagers gave you. Fu sighed as she scratched the back of her neck. The relationship between her and Shumei were quite vitriolic at times, as Fu grew and developed a hard-ass attitude to counter Shumei's jerk-ass one during the initial stage of their relationship. If she were asked what kind of relationship that she had with her biju, she would admit that it was, as Shumei would put it, quite like a significantly older big brother and his little sister without any parental involvement. Right. Sorry. Fu said, genuinely apologizing to her biju, but she was being rather taciturn and awkward about it, indicating her discomfort in how she carelessly spoke against him before. Are you actually talking to him? Satsuki asked, quite befuddled by what she had seen. Yeah. Sorry, sometimes I lapsed and ended up talking to him verbally, which usually earned me some harsh glares from the villagers. But yours seem a bit more confused and surprised, which is quite refreshing in itself. I have to say, I sense no hatred from it at all. Fu began before she continued, anyway, yeah, we are actually quite amicable, but don't say that near any of the councilmen of Taki. The green-haired girl then abruptly turned her head towards her right, as if alerted by something. She looked at a particular spot in that direction for 2 seconds before saying, I don't really like eavesdroppers. If any of you want to hear us talking, then at least do so when you are present. That is, if you're not a hostile. If you are, then you may stay right there and wait for my attack. As if on cue, Satsuki saw Jiraiya, Tsunade and Shizune jump down towards them, landing only a few feet away from the two girls. Jiraiya's gaze landed on Fu, and then he said, I assume that you are the Jinchuriki of Nanabe. You've heard as much, haven't you? Fu rhetorically asked, knowing that they already knew because she just sensed them and might have been hidden for longer. Who are you three? Jiraiya placed his hand over his chest and said, I am Jiraiya of the Sanin. Sage of the Toads, the beautiful blonde bombshell beside me is Tsunade of the Sanin, the slug princess, and the one beside her is Shizune, Tsunade's pupil, and a talented medic nin in her own right. Fu then crossed her arms and said, and are you in league with her? She pointed to Satsuki, you're not in cahoots with the guy that she just reduced into a state of inexistence, did you? Jiraiya's sight turned to Satsuki, who was just about to fully recover from her exhaustion, and he let his surprise be shown. You did what? Satsuki blew out a small amount of air from her mouth and said, I used my power to obliterate him. I contained him and then I released a lot of my energy in just that space and the result was this. She gestured to the empty space behind her, the place where she killed the mutated man. Tsunade raised her eyebrows as she whistled in admiration. If it were true, judging by the lack of evidences that it happened in the first place, then the Uchiha's power might be at a level far higher than she initially thought of. Alright then, where did you hail from? Fu asked. Konoha, answered a new participant from above. They looked up and found the figure of one Kanzaki Naruto whose appearance appeared to be slightly disheveled and singed, flying down towards them. When he landed, he continued, we hailed from Konoha. Naruto. Satsuki exclaimed as she approached him out of concern, what happened to the one you fought, the big one? The blonde frowned, as if he was dissatisfied with something, and then he answered her question, either he died, or somehow still alive and escaped from me. Either way, our fight is over. Moments before, victory was unattainable. The sentence echoed in his mind as the blonde kept pummeling him without mercy. His strength was amplified as the aura from the biju that he extracted from one of his kin gave each of his attacks a destructive substance that the blonde himself did not have besides his impeccable strength that surpassed his own and rivaled his master. As he violently crashed into numerous trees that splintered under the durability of his body thanks to the blonde's latest punch, he realized that he could not hope to win. Unless he could summon his master, which he could not, then this was a pointless battle to be continued. Therefore, there was only one choice that he needed to make. One course of action to be performed. They were far away now. They might not even be in the same country where they started the fight in. After all, he had been rather mobile in the orchestration of the battle in which he was the conductor and the big guy was the one affected by his music. He had the big man cornered and severely weakened. Scanning his bodily functions allowed him to see that his attacks had pushed him so close to death, and for him to reach that line and die would require a fraction of his power. But Naruto had to admit that the man was quite powerful. Though not enough, he would certainly give Sakura a run for her money, as he was definitely more powerful than the one that she told him she had fought before during the time when he fought the Kyuubi. Now, as he's still covered in the aura of the Biju inside of him, he was preparing to finish the battle. Kyuubi, can you give a little boost? Just for a little extra amount of certainty. Certainly. The bubbles present within the aura that covered him reacted as if it were bubbles of air created in the act of boiling a volume of water with fire that was hot enough to boil it under the span of a half-second. Such a volatile aura would normally cause an adverse effect to the one enveloped within it, but with his exceptional durability, he only felt as if he were covered in fire. Which he had experienced before. Willingly. Under his own power and volition. For experimental reasons. He then flew towards the downed giant with his right hand pulled back, fully intent on finishing it with the last punch. He saw it coming. And with all his remaining power, with all the remaining energy that he possessed, he leapt away from the attack that the blonde was about to unleash. He succeeded. He heard and felt the reverberation, the aftereffect of his attack, but he did not care for that. He ignited the remaining energy within him to perform the last resort method, and as his body began to glow red, he leapt towards Naruto and wrapped him with his arms and legs. Then he whispered one thing to his ear. Let's see if we can survive this. Before Naruto could even react, the man exploded, explosively exuding heat that could equal the temperature of the sun's surface and kinetic force equal to that of tons of a bomb being dropped at once. He didn't even leave pieces of his body. Naruto finished his recount, but the explosion was quite strong. It did hurt me a little bit. By the way, did any of you happen to hear it? I know it happened quite far from here, but I'm afraid that we didn't. Answered Jiraiya. Still, as much as this development with Fu over here piqued my interest, we need to return to Konoha. Not just to bring back Tsunade, but to inform the Hokage that we have encountered two of these strange men. Oh, that reminds me. Naruto suddenly said as he turned to Satsuki, what happened to the other one, the one you fought? It was not the Uchiha heiress that answered, instead, it was the other Jinchuriki available in the proximity. She obliterated him to inexistence. She said it rather simply with a rather impish smile. Naruto blinked once as he looked towards Fu with a gaze that said, what? And then, he turned to Satsuki and asked her, is what she said true? Well, there's no proof of it ever happened, that's how you know it. Fu exclaimed before she giggled at what she said, somewhat proud of herself for saying that. Although I did witness it. You shall have my testimony in court, Mr. Judge. Then it was clear that she had set up a joke. Admittedly, it was a little funny, but not enough to elicit a roaring laugh from them, but enough for Naruto, Jiraiya and Shizune to be slightly amused and chuckle slightly, while Satsuki and Tsunade could only shake their heads. Well, good. You might not have heard it, but the one you killed. He was the one responsible for the explosion at the hospital. Naruto revealed to Satsuki. Though she had an assumption that it was the case, hearing it confirmed by him elated her somewhat, knowing that she had killed the one responsible for the deaths of many by not only blowing up the hospital, but to also use the Kyuubi to kill numerous other people. It gave her a sense of relief. Oh, by the way, Fu exclaimed once more, bringing them out of their reverie, please take me with you to your village if it wouldn't be that much of a bother to you. She said as she clapped her hands together beneath her chin as if begging for them to actually take her. Ha! Such an elegant response was the statement that came out of Jiraiya's mouth due to the sudden request made by the Jinchuriki of the Seven Tails. Then, he followed it with a less than rhetorical question, why do you want to do that? While he himself was interested in the Jinchuriki, what she requested was outside of his power. However, being one of the few ninjas of Konoha that held a de facto rank that put him in the same place as an advisor of the Hokage, he was, in a way, someone important to the village. And that position allowed him to have some power over the decision that the Hokage might choose out of all the other options. However, for now, he only needed the reason as to why the Jinchuriki wanted to come with them. And what he got was the somber expression that she sported the moment the question got out from his mouth. Let's just say that the village in which I was born in is not my home. I have not, and perhaps will never acknowledge it as such. If that is not a good enough reason for you, then shouldn't my status as a Jinchuriki suffice? After all, would I not be giving your village more power? At the very least, my ability would be given to a place that could recognize me as both a person and a weapon at the same time. Jiraiya knew that Takigakure was not as resourceful or knowledgeable as any of the 5 great shinobi villages. Judging from what Fu said, it could be assumed that not only was she considered as an unperson, but her ability was also not acknowledged. Pitifully, such was the fate of a Jinchuriki if they belonged to a village who did not know how to properly use or treat their Jinchuriki, unlike Kumo, who apparently had a Jinchuriki whom the people of the village admired and his student who might not be as popular as their mentor, but was apparently regarded as a valuable member of the village nevertheless. Wait a minute, Naruto said as he walked over to the green-haired girl who shared his status as a person who contained an energy being within themselves. Her statement made the hair on the back of his neck bristle. Are you saying that these people treated you horribly because of your status? She shrugged in response and said, more or less. Still, they are severely misinformed and misguided, so. Nah, that doesn't make them any more likable than a piece of art made out of shit. She said with so much venom that a lesser man would shiver. Still, the so-called demon that they whispered behind my back when they thought I couldn't hear them. He's the only one that I could call his friend, and he's not even a human. Funny how a supposed demon can be more human than human, huh? She rhetorically asked with a bitter tone of voice that gave away the pained soul within. Naruto was equally saddened by what she revealed as much as he was worried over his own status. It might be a bit selfish, but considering how he got his fame and adulation, how would the villagers react if this were to get out? He acknowledged that not every person could be as understanding as his teammates, and they might fear him because of it, but perhaps considering what he had done to the village, they might not mind at all and would not be treated like his fellow Jinchuriki in front of him. How long? He asked Fu, how long has it been like this for you? Fu pondered for a bit before she said, ever since I can remember I suppose. Which is 6 years ago I suppose. I was 2 at the time I think. Naruto sighed at the plight that his fellow Jinchuriki had experienced. He badly wanted to allow her entrance to Konoha, but once again, he had no weight. Technically, he had a voice that could sway the government of Konoha. His opinion would, theoretically, be valued because of his title, in a similar way that Jiraiya and Tsunade's would because of their status as 2 part of the 3 Sannin. But would that be enough? Well, perhaps they could try a little wager to allow her entry to the village. He then turned to Jiraiya and said, how about we play a little gamble so that Fu can be included to Konoha? A gamble? Tsunade said, her interest piqued at the word that he chose. What do you mean by that? We say to the old man that these men are here because the people responsible for Fu has sold her out to their master. Asked Naruto, considering the treatment that she received, it's not that far of a stretch to think that they might be seeking for a way to dispose of her somehow, and if they were willing to just let her go, then would it be a surprise to them that instead of being dead, she found her way to another village? I'd say that is actually very likely. Fu answered, besides that, they wouldn't dare to attack a more powerful village for having their Jinchuriki if they were willing to part with her in the first place, right? Especially not a village who has them in their roster. She said as she pointed to Naruto and Satsuki. If we take her in, we wouldn't incur the wrath of a village that could incite a large-scale war, considering their forces. And besides that, Takigakure doesn't have many loyal allies. They wanted her gone, they could have it. But not in the way they intended. Naruto said. Jiraiya smirked as he crossed his arms, not to mention that for them to sell out one of their own is something that would brand them as cowards. Even if we were to spread the news, they might deny what they did, but they won't try to get you back. Fu smiled widely as she said, so does this mean that I'm coming with you guys? Naruto smiled back in a gesture of reciprocation, and said with a pleased tone of voice, yeah. You're coming with us. When Naruto fought the White Giant, Naruto inadvertently brought them to a spot nearby Kusagakure. The explosion which ended the fight created a massive crater, one big enough to be mistaken as the aftereffect of an asteroid hit that contained nothing but the singed, blackened soil and the ashes of things sturdy enough to survive the explosion that he had wrought. Some of these ashes were the remains of the giant, middling among the ashes of the inorganic and organic, mixed together and blackened to the point where they could not be differentiated to a pair of normal eyes. The wind would easily bring these ashes away from the crater, but some ashes somehow remained. And slowly, they began to merge, as if remembering what they once were, and what they needed to become again. It would take time. After all, what the Uchiha did to him was still at its experimental stage, but nevertheless, these ashes would become whole once again. It turns out that the self-combustion did not manage to kill him after all. Though it was decided that Fu would come with them to Konoha, Tsunade opted for them to take a rest somewhere in the Land of Fire as it was quite late at night and the Takigakure was no longer a place where they could just enter as of that moment. Shizune and Jiraiya agreed as they needed some R&R, and though Naruto, Satsuki and Fu did not feel the need to rest, they agreed that at the very least, they should get away from the proximity of Taki as fast as possible and lay low. Satsuki then created a spherical construct similar to the one that she made for Jiraiya, except it was a bit bigger and contained 3 seats for Jiraiya, Tsunade and Shizune to occupy. When Naruto offered his aid to Satsuki to grant the construct the ability to fly, Satsuki declined as she showed the armored gauntlets and boots that she made using her powers and her capability to fly acquired by the aforementioned constructs. Initially, Naruto was surprised, but then a sudden sense of familiarity hit him and he correctly guessed that it was Shiho's design, which she confirmed. Tsunade did not have the slightest idea of what they were talking about. She did not know who this Shiho person was. Project Gear Up. All she knew was that their location might be found quickly if they did not leave right now, and they heeded her and left the country. Currently, they were staying at an inn northwest of Takigakure after Tsunade told them to land there, as apparently she knew the proprietor of the place and can get a special price from her after a favor that she did for her. The recent acceptance of a healing job was not the only healing job that she had taken during her days as a vagabond. At times, she would be pulled by her conscience to help those in dire need, and sometimes, without any rewards afterwards. The proprietor's husband was one of the few people she had helped, even if it were just to delay his death and allowing him to say goodbye to his wife. It was something that earned her the proprietor's trust and willingness to assist her however she could. When they get there, they were allowed to have the most expensive rooms that they have available for half the price, and so they took it, with Jiraiya giving the money instead of Tsunade, which caught her slightly by surprise, as he was quite adamant about being the one who would pay for the rooms. But nevertheless, they booked 4 rooms. Jiraiya were roomed with Naruto, Tsunade with Shizune, and Fu with Satsuki. Tsunade and Shizune were fast asleep because of their previous consumption of alcohol that took its toll, especially with Tsunade, considering that she drank a lot. Jiraiya already slept because of how late it was, and that left. Along with me, it seems that Satsuki and Fu are not sleeping. Naruto thought, knowing this thanks to his incredible hearing. He was now sitting at the chair near the room's window that offered him the view of the small town. He was not looking through the walls to see the 2 girls for one reason only, which was to respect their privacy. Hearing the noises they might be making, however, was not that much of a breach of privacy, considering that seeing through a wall might be a voyeuristic thing to do, but hearing the noises that came through them was not a voyeuristic behavior. Hey Kyuubi. Naruto began to talk with the beast within him. What do you think about this? The 7 tails is your. Is it right of me to call him your sibling? You would be right to call him as such. Kyuubi responded, though our relationship with each other hasn't been amicable for the last 1,000 years. We used to be quite well, as friendly and vitriolic as any sibling is, I suppose, but we have been pretty dysfunctional ever since our birth. The idea that a being as powerful as them having a dysfunctional familial relationship with one another was not really surprising, considering the fact that they were able to live for millennia and possessing an unrivaled amount of energy that could only be equaled to a few beings and people in the world. It made their status close to a god, which explained how they could be so dysfunctional, but nevertheless, it was still quite amusing. Then, his expression turned rather somber as he said, but is Fu's treatment considered normal or average for a Jinchuriki? I assume that it's because of people's ignorance and lack of knowledge in the subject, but is it the norm that this kind of treatment is pretty much expected when one is a Jinchuriki? Pretty much. At best, those in the know of your status but not about how it really is would treat you with indifference, and at worst, they will disregard your existence and would bully and belittle you. Single quote. Have you had other hosts before me? Were they treated that way too? Naruto asked the Kyuubi. For the first question, I did have some hosts before you. But their status was kept secret from the public knowledge of their village, and so they were not treated horribly. Answered the Kyuubi, but if their status had been known, then perhaps they would be treated with coldness. But I suppose what really matters is what the villagers see first. The Jinchuriki, or the person who happened to have the status. Single quote. Have you been reading my mind somehow? Naruto asked, feeling as if that last sentence that he spoke was directed at him specifically, especially after the doubts that he had when he knew what Fu had experienced. Maybe. Maybe not. The Biju's tone was filled with amusement. Still, that's a load off your shoulders, isn't it? Naruto could only shake his head and chuckle in amusement at what the Biju said. However, after a moment, he then asked, can I talk to you about Uzumaki Kushina now? Sure, was what the Biju said, remembering what he said that they would have words. What do you want to know about her, Kit? Does she have crimson hair and purple eyes? Fair complexity? Small nose. Lips with medium, somewhat ideal thickness? Naruto asked these questions in rapid succession. The questions made the Biju silent for a moment, and then he said, and how the hell did you know her facial features in such a detail? I remembered her. Naruto answered, her face was the very first memory that I could recall, and I believe that it happened almost immediately after my birth, considering how much she sweated. Man, I know that your brain can be considered superior to the normal ones as much as your body could, but to think that you are able to remember such a thing from one of the earliest point in your life is astounding. Kyuubi remarked, but yeah, that's what she looked like. Is there anything else about her that you have not known as of yet? Well, let's see. Her personality for one. The second is her likes and dislikes. The third is her life before my birth. And the last one is the man whom she married, my birth father. Naruto listed off the things that he did not know about his mother. Very well. In proper order, she's a fireball, metaphorically speaking. The vigorous personality that she has is matched only by the vibrant color of her hair or such metaphors. She likes ramen, salt ramen to be exact, pranks, chatting and cooking. Doesn't like coffee or anything bitter and most of all, giving up when there's still a chance. Before you came along, she lived a life as a refugee from a war-torn village who is sent to Konoha to be sheltered. Let's just say that she is quite important, as few Uzumaki live still. And I'm included in that few numbers. Correct. When she was a child, she was brash, forceful, and exuberant. The traits didn't disappear over time, they were refined. And it was in her early teenage phase that she met the man who would end up fathering you. The Kyuubi paused before he revealed who his father was. His name was Minato Namikaze. Does the name ring a bell? It did ring a bell. After all, who in Konoha, or better yet, who in the elemental countries didn't know the fourth Hokage? Single quote. Wow. Taji Okasan told me that my birth parents were powerful ninjas, but to think that one of them is the former Hokage. He thought before he was reminded of something important. Wait, you caused his death, didn't you? That I did. Kyuubi said, but not with a proud tone of voice, but with a matter-of-fact tone, back then. It was because I saw how he was going to contain me again after I gained my freedom. I mortally wounded him. But in the end, I was forced to go back, forced to be imprisoned again. I was fighting for my freedom. He got in the way, and so I fought and killed him. But my efforts were all for naught as he subjected me to the imprisonment once again. Imprisonment. Freedom. Wait a minute. Single quote. So that's how you know who my birth mother was. Naruto muttered as he realized something that shook him. She was your Jinchuriki, wasn't she? She was. The Kyuubi answered, already knowing that Naruto would be able to come to that conclusion so quickly. If you need further proof, then ask yourself as to why you have those whiskers on your cheeks. It was the trait that you inadvertently inherited through my influence. But, when did all this happen? Naruto asked, asking the question which he feared that he already know the answer to. No. Did it happen right after my birth? What was it that make you Break free from her. Before the Biju could answer his question, he heard something else. Naruto. Someone, familiar, Fu, calling for him. Naruto, are you awake? Hearing her sound allowed him to pinpoint her location, and he then saw him waiting outside his door. Along with Satsuki, I am. What are you guys doing up? Oh wow, you can see through walls. Fu said in a whisper as she turned to Satsuki and continued with, that is so cool, I can only see far away, not through objects. Anyway, so, I've heard from Satsuki that you have this group that houses people you call superhumans. Considering the physical requirements, I think I might be one of you guys. Naruto then approached the door and opened it. What's your superpower? Naruto was slightly impressed by the green aura that enveloped Fu, which she had said that it was the result of her power mixed with the aura of Shumei, the seven tails contained within her. However, she was not able to say what her power was exactly, and that left Naruto to examine her, whether or not she was one of his kind, and he needed more than just seeing her, he needed to feel what she could dish out. Are you ready? The green-haired girl asked Naruto. Ready. Satsuki watched over the two at the sidelines with her hands clasped on her back. Don't blow it all out of proportion, Fu. She said with a smile. You might not be able to hurt him, but the echoes of your punch can be loud. Fu smiled back and gave her a thumbs up from her free hand and said, got it. All right then. Satsuki said before she said, go. The speed that Fu could achieve during her charge was a little bit faster compared to Sakura's, but not to the level that Naruto was able to achieve. The strength, however, was at his level, and this allowed her to hurt him when she performed a punching charge directed at his abdomen. In fact, not only did she hurt him, she sent him flying towards the nearby trees and ended up destroying them. Naruto did not fall flat on his back on the ground, however, he floated back to the wincing form of Satsuki and Fu, and the former said this in response to what the latter did. Okay, we might have overlooked the noise that could make. The blonde boy's response was to smile and said, still, that confirms it. Your power is the ability to produce a large amount of physical energy, just like me and Sakura. However, the way you receive that energy may be a bit similar to mine. Really? Fu asked, what might it be? It seems that in addition to the ability to convert your chakra into variable forms of energy, you are also able to absorb external sources of energy and make them yours. Naruto answered, I think I can do it too, but it's not confirmed. How do you know that, Naruto? Satsuki asked. The mixing of auras that she exhibited. Naruto answered before he called upon Kyuubi's power and coated himself with Kyuubi's aura. See. The color is not like yours. This indicates that. Holy shit. You're a Jinchuriki too. Fu exclaimed before she interrupted him from speaking further by hugging him, and it made him turn off the aura cloak that enveloped him. By the gods, I never thought I would meet kindred spirits like this. Who do you have inside of you? I have the seven tails, as you might have known, but I don't know about you. Who do you have? Who do you have? Suddenly, the back of her shirt was pulled by a giant purple hand that slowly removed him off from Naruto. Satsuki used the hand construct to lift her up and then place her somewhere else, and through it all, her face conveyed her slight annoyance at her behavior when she found out that Naruto was a Jinchuriki. Hey, what's the big idea? Fu asked as she looked at Satsuki. There was a moment of silence where Satsuki and Fu exchanged glances, and then Fu said, what? I'm just happy that I found somebody like me, is that a bad thing? Satsuki sighed and she rubbed the bridge of her nose as she realized that, to the green-haired girl, he was someone whom he could really identify with, more so compared to herself and Naruto. Sorry. Anyway, who do you have, Naruto? Fu asked the blonde as she turned to him. I have the Kyuubi. Naruto answered as he set his foot on the ground. I only got to be a Jinchuriki just recently, too. But nobody in my village knows. Fu nodded as she digested the information. I see. Wait, you call him the Kyuubi. You don't know his name. Naruto frowned at what she said. A name. A given name. He didn't even know that they had a name other than their title as Ikibi, Nibi, and so forth, and so he said. No, I do not. But, maybe I will ask him later. He said to himself, Fu, and the Biju inside him. If he trusts you enough, then he will give it to you Naruto, don't worry. Fu said with a fond smile, the guy inside me is Shumei. As I told Satsuki before, he can be a bit of a jerk. But he's kind. I wouldn't call him my friend if he's not. Looking at her expression, Naruto could tell that she was very fond of Shumei, the seven-tailed biju which resided in her body. Considering what she said about the disposition that the villagers of Taki held against her, it was not that much of a surprise for her to befriend the only one being who would be friendly with her, even if said being was the biju that everyone else feared. Anyway, I am a superhuman, yes. So, does that mean that I can join this team of yours? She asked in a hopeful tone of voice. Clearly, she was rather excited at the prospect. Well, we'll see if you can be counted as a member of Konoha first. But as far as I'm concerned, you are one of us. Our friend. Her reaction to this was to smile widely that the edges of her mouth nearly touched her ears. Then, out of nowhere, she shocked both of them, and herself when suddenly, tears began to leak out from her orange-colored eyes. Fu, why are you? Satsuki said, somewhat at a loss for words at her reaction. Huh. The Nanabe Jinchuriki wondered as she felt the cold tears trailing down on her cheeks. Oh, I'm so sorry, I'm just so happy to feel like I actually belong somewhere after all these years, and all, Then, the reason why she cried came to Naruto. Even if she had been so exuberant and talkative, it might have been her defense mechanism that she set up to weather the treatment that she had been given. And now, with him acknowledging her as more than just a person, but as one of his own, a friend, it caused the hurt soul within her to surface. With this in mind, Naruto placed his hand over her shoulder, stopping her from further explanations and attempt to wipe out the tears. She looked up to his face, and saw a smile that made her stomach flutter. Then, he said to her, welcome to our family, Fu. It was an impulse, that had to be it. After all the years of being treated with severe indifference and cold, hateful glares from the people whom she was supposed to be loyal to and hiding it behind a mask of exuberant personality that reciprocated their indifference with her own, hearing that she was a part of something that she truly wanted to be was. Without even thinking it, she went and hugged Naruto and placed her head onto his chest as she quietly wept. Naruto looked at Satsuki who understood why Fu reacted in such a way and then he gestured an invitation with his hand to have her join the hug. At first, she was hesitant, but after a second, the hesitation was gone and then she joined in the hug without any protest, and she ended up enjoying the warmth as well. After a minute, Fu then whispered two words with genuine, heartfelt gratitude. Thank you. Meanwhile, in Konoha. The people of Konoha rarely paid attention to the stars above them at nighttime. During this time, their attention were focused on other things entirely, and only few of them would even spare their thought to see the stars at night unless they were a pair of sickly lovey-dovey lovebirds who wanted to do so. Because of this, and a shinobi's lack of interest in meticulously charting the patterns of the stars and the changes that they would have seen had they were bothered enough to do so, none of them noticed, or if they did, they didn't find it weird, that there was a star that was a bit bigger than the rest, and that it was red in color instead of the usual white. The red star was immobile, floating just a few kilometers above the village. And it was looking down towards the village with its eyes. In fact, it wasn't a star at all. It was a living being, a human. Well, a humanoid being, a female, with long red hair that shone bright in contrast to the night sky, perhaps unnaturally so, but if one were to see it, they would think that it was beautiful, like an animated flame that flickered so radiantly. Her eyes of a rare color were locked upon the village, and her mind, filled with turmoil as it was set on the thought of meeting with this hero of Konoha who intrigued her. She didn't dare on thinking about the implication of what his physical features could mean for his parentage, but let it be said that she was angry, insulted, and filled with anxiety at the thought that she had been fed with lies for more than half a decade. However, she was also scared of the prospect of meeting him. Or barring that, meeting anyone else in the village that might have known her. After all, as far as they know, she no longer exists, and to him, well, he might not have any idea of her existence. Still, she supposed that there was no way around it. Sooner or later, she would have to meet him. She must. It must be true. It must be him. Naruto. Naruto, Fu, and Satsuki flew independently as the latter was carrying Jiraiya, Tsunade and Shizune with her glowing spherical construct with 3 seats to accommodate 3-person instead of just 1. They landed at a point in the street road where the road went full circle, and in doing so, they attracted quite a lot of attention from the villagers of Konoha. As their eyes followed the movements of the superhumans and the ones they brought, they landed at the ground below. When the spherical shell disintegrated in a manner similar to how a flower loses its petals, 2 of the 3 Sannin along with one of their pupil removed themselves from the chairs and stepped their foot into the ground. Looking at the attention that they had received, especially with how the older generations recognized and was surprised at Tsunade's presence. I told you we should have landed at the outskirts. Jiraiya remarked to Naruto, who suggested the idea. They're not here because of our powers, you know. Naruto answered, they're here because of Tsunade-san. Though Fu is also a new face, she is not a familiar one and thus, she is not the center of attention. And considering that Tsunade is a legendary kunoichi of Konoha, her return is something that they did not accept, hence, the attention. Still, not that used in receiving such attention. Jiraiya remarked as he put his hands in the pockets of his trousers. Meanwhile, Fu is quite impressed with the sight of the village. Takigakure, despite having a landmark which was the impressive giant tree at the center of the village, was largely a traditional-looking village compared to Konoha, who actually had much more stone-constructed buildings compared to Takigakure, which had a largely wood-focused architecture. Satsuki was rather silent and trying to not catch any overt attention. However, compared to everyone else, besides Naruto perhaps, she was looking at the small but progressively growing crowd around them. Through her observation, she found that Naruto was indeed right, the majority of the people here were looking at Tsunade and not anybody else. Then, she saw a familiar face in the crowd, her mother, Makoto, who merely smiled as she looked at her daughter with crossed arms. Satsuki responded by lifting her hand slightly to the level of her head and did a small wave, which her mother reciprocated. Anyway, let's go to the old man first, shall we? Naruto suggested, we have a lot that we need to talk about after all. Hiruzen did not sleep the previous night. Though his eyes were red and riddled with the red veins that indicated his lack of rest, he was determined to re-examine, re-evaluate and re-checking everything that might be connected to the problems with Danzo. The pale boy of Root was his only link, as he might have the knowledge of Danzu's activity prior to the fall of Root, including the possibility that he was connected with the one calling himself Madara Uchiha. Though Hiruzen knew what that implied considering what he and himself had done 8 years ago, the existing possibility was something that he couldn't ignore. Yesterday, he had scoured the village for any available information regarding Danzo's involvement in something that one could not count as an official Konoha affair. A man like Danzo would not leave loose ends, let alone any sort of archive that would describe his activities, and so, Hiruzen's search came up with nothing. Danzo was as meticulous as he was morally ambiguous, and Hiruzen found some regret in how he wasn't able to prevent his friend fall into the darkness after entrusting him in the position where he would be required to fight with and from it. He who fights monsters must take care lest he too become a monster. The words were spoken by Tobarama Senju, his teacher, and initially, he believed that he was talking about how war can desensitize people from violence and leading them to become less than human, but after his dispute with Danzo, he realized that there was another meaning to what he said. That those who fight evil must preserve his soul, his spirit, his idealism, so that he will not become such. Danzu's spirit and soul was strong, but he lacked in idealism, and that might have led him to become what he was supposed to fight. Pay evil unto evil. But that's not how our teachers want this world to work. Danzo, was the old monkey's thought as he sat on the chair of his office. Hiruzen knew how easy it was to dehumanize their enemies, giving them labels that devalued them as a human being, but once those labels were stripped away, one could see that their enemies were pretty much the same as them. As long as they weren't blinded by some sort of misdirected hatred. He sighed as he rubbed the bridge of his nose out of his slight exhaustion. In addition to the problems that Danzo and his secret organization had given him, he had to be faced with the arrival of the Raikage in the very near future, that is to say, tomorrow, if not sooner than that. Though he had already prepared for his arrival, quite painstakingly too he might add, he was understandably worried. After all, for Kumo to go to Konoha and offer a stronger alliance between the two would make one think that there was something bigger behind it all. Especially if one were the veterans of any of the previous wars. Still, at the very least, there was one problem in which the solution might be able to be resolved far quicker. He had seen the spherical construct that streaked through the sky and landed at a spot in the village, and he came to the right conclusion, which was that it was Satsuki, Naruto and Jiraiya, bringing back Tsunade from her self-imposed exile. When his door was opened 14 minutes after he saw the construct landing, he was greeted with 6 people instead of the expected 5, the pig not included. Naruto then said to him, "Mission accomplished, old man. That, and some other things as well. We have something to discuss with you, but after a debriefing with Tsunade-san of course." His consciousness was faint, but nevertheless, he could at least be aware of his current status. The last thing he remembered was the attack. It came out of nowhere. The method that they used was also unorthodox and allowed them to have a massive advantage. He also remembered his brother. Shin was his name, telling him to keep himself hidden, to keep himself safe, and above all, to not try to fend off the attackers. He complied, despite the fact that it went against his training, because his brother told him so. The initial plan was to escape as soon as the attack ceased. But the attackers leveled several sections of the base, and though it did not kill him, he was trapped without any food or drink for days in his hiding spot. He could also remember the struggle that he experienced to get out of the greatly destroyed base. Fueled only by the beating of his heart and the thought that he needed to relay the message of Root's fall and the leader's disappearance, he crawled out of the destroyed base and went to Konoha, ignoring any thought of resting or sustaining himself with food or drink. In case that he did not survive to relay the message verbally, he had it written and placed it on his person so that someone could read it from his dead body. Through sheer force of will, he reached Konoha. But he fell before he could reach the Hokage. Now, his destiny was no longer at the hand of the Root leader. He was weak, incapacitated, unable to even open his eyes. But he will persevere. For the sake of the village. For the sake of the village. Hiruzen looked at the green-haired girl who merely smiled sheepishly as she waited for his decision. Once again, Naruto had brought a dangerous, but important element to Konoha in addition to the red-haired girl named Tayuya. He had told him of the circumstances of their meeting, the girl's status, those who were after her, and the reason why the girl wanted to get out of the village. She explained that her own village sold her out to the mutated men's master, and such an action caused an understandable loss of loyalty that she once possessed. The old man came to the conclusion that Tokigakure simply did not know how to control her and threw her out to the wolves, so to speak. Such a cowardly move, Naruto told him, showed that they would not incite war if she were to become a part of another village, especially not one of the Great Five villages. Even though Hiruzen felt that there might be something more than that, Hiruzen agreed, thinking that at the very least, the village could use another shinobi. But after his verbal agreement, Naruto then added something else. "Thank you for that, old man. Now, there's something else about Fu besides the fact that she's a Jinchuriki." He said at first, she's also a superhuman. Quote. One more. And so soon at that? Hiruzen asked in slight surprise. Those who did not know of Tayuya, which was Tsunade, Shizune, Satsuki, and Fu, looked rather confused by what Hiruzen said. Then, Naruto continued, "Well, the circumstances of the meetings are not planned, you know." He said rather sarcastically, but nevertheless. "I want to include her to the team. I've seen her powers firsthand, and she's as strong, if not more than Sakura." "Really?" Hiruzen said, somewhat surprised by his statement. "Quite impressive, considering that her strength is only second compared to you." "Okay, I have to ask." Tsunade suddenly said as she crossed her arms, "Who is this Sakura?" "The boy also said that I'm as strong as her when we fought." Hiruzen raised one of his eyebrows and said to one of his former students, "You fought him?" "Why?" he asked. At this, Tsunade had the decency to look slightly embarrassed, owing to the fact that she lost and that she was technically the one who incited it in the first place. "Many reasons," she offered. Hiruzen sighed and said, "Well, she can stay, Naruto. But we need to maintain her status a secret. Just like yours. I'll arrange." Wait a minute, never mind, an apartment has already been arranged for you. Unfortunately, you will have to share it with another person, but don't worry. He then smiled and said, I'm sure you two will get along just fine. My nose is kind of itchy somehow, thought Yuya as she lightly scratched her nose. Anyway, you have done well, Naruto, Satsuki. I know this is not a sanctioned mission of the sort that a shinobi usually have, but I will send you the money as soon as possible. Each of you will get 100,000 ryu as a sign of a job well done. And, since you told me that you fought with the mutated men, I consider this as a B-ranked mission, and will add another 100,000 each. Use the money wisely Naruto, Satsuki. Alright. Naruto answered, somewhat surprised, considering that he didn't expect to be paid. Sure. Was Satsuki's answer. She was as surprised as Naruto at the amount of money that the Hokage had given them. Jiraiya chuckled and said, be proud, brats. Your first mission and you got 100,000 ryu on a B-ranked mission. Hell, I remembered my first mission back in my genin days, and well, let's just say that it wasn't pleasant. Tsunade sighed and shook her head as she closed her eyes shut, as if she just remembered something that she didn't want to remember ever again. Perhaps their first mission involved them in something nauseating. Attending to the elderly is a proud first mission to have, Jiraiya, Tsunade, never forget that. Hiruzen said with a rather mischievous smile, obviously remembering the unpleasantness that he had put them in, what with the wiping the old peoples behind and all that the mission required them to do. I can still remember the smell of their diapers. Tsunade muttered as her face turned slightly pale. Though I agree that we should respect our elders, it was not a pleasant experience for youngsters, sensei. She stated rather flatly. Your opinion is noted. Hiruzen said to Tsunade with a smirk before he turned back to Fu. By the way, if you were counted as their kunoichi, then why don't you wear your village's forehead protector? He asked of her. Fu merely shrugged and answered, I don't really have that much loyalty to them. And if you ask me, my inclusion to the village's forces might have been engineered to make it easier for me to disappear. She air quoted the word, you know what I mean. She asked rhetorically. There might be some credence to that, but I'll keep my opinion to myself. Hiruzen thought before he said to them, well, your status as well as Naruto's status are a secret, so as long as you behave normally. Or, within the boundaries of what is considered as normal, which you will find to be quite flexible, then I'm sure you will find yourself welcomed by the populace. The old man then wrote something on a piece of paper and amassing some ryu before turning to Satsuki. Satsuki, I want you to accompany Fu and buy her some clothing. Bring them to this address, as this will be her new home. As for beds, and such, your roommate is more than well equipped and has some spares, so you only need to concern yourself over clothes. Satsuki took the money, and Fu smiled widely as she nodded. Then the green-haired girl turned to the Hokage and bowed, thank you so much for what you did. Your kindness is very appreciated Hokage-san. Hiruzen chuckled and replied with, think nothing of it Fu. She said to the Nanabi Jinchuriki. Satsuki then said to Fu, let's go. She began to walk towards the door of his office, but not before she turned to Naruto and said, see you later, Naruto. She said with a fond smile before she left, followed closely by Fu. Naruto's eyes followed Satsuki's retreating form longer than it should have been. After a minute, it took the Hokage's throat clearing to make him turn back to the old man, who was smiling in amusement, an expression that was shared by the others who saw the way he looked at her. Anyway, Hiruzen said, his tone of voice was dripping with amusement, Naruto, you and Satsuki are dismissed until further notice. Tsunade, Jiraiya and I have something that we need to discuss. About Tsunade's duties I suppose. Naruto rhetorically asked, knowing about what they might want to talk about. Alright then, all. Hold on for a second there, brat. Tsunade said quite suddenly, surprising the others within the office. While I am grateful that you erased my fear, it occurred to me that you said all those things just to rile me up, didn't you? To allow some kind of opening so that you can erase my hemophobia. Naruto allowed himself to show a small smile and answered. It was actually, yes. Though she frowned, the smile that she showed him was a sign that she was slightly impressed by what he did, cheeky brat. She muttered, got to be careful with you. Not only you are strong enough to destroy a village, but a schemer as well. Naruto merely chuckled before he began to walk to the door. I'll see you later, old man, Jiraiya-san, Shizune-san. He said before he left the office. That boy is scary. Tsunade said after he left before she chuckled and crossed her arms, but I like him. As she said that, her smile turned from a smirk to a genuine smile filled with fondness for the young man. He was kind, had a strong personality, a tendency to help someone worthy of it as much as he possibly can, and not to mention he was quite easy on the eyes too. Perhaps it would do her good to not continue that train of thought. Anyway, what do you want to talk about, sensei? She asked her former teacher. Well, Naruto was right, we need to talk about what I want you to do. Hiruzen said at first, then, his expression turned rather grim, but I need to talk to you too about the recent news. Danzo Shimura, the name is familiar to you I know, and you need to know that he is either dead or taken by the works of an enemy that has yet to be identified. The news brought down a tense silence into the office. After a moment to let the information sink in, Hiruzen continued, and I have some reason, though unfounded and not supported by any evidence mind you, that he is either killed or taken by an individual calling himself Madara Uchiha. What? Tsunade had to say that due to the sheer absurdity of her teacher's statement. You heard me right. Hiruzen responded, Tsunade, in addition to teaching a new batch of prospective medic nin and, as you might have assumed, performing an additional examination on the superhumans, I need you to bring a certain someone out of coma. He is a link that can verify my assumption, all that remains of Root. Jiraiya frowned as he said, so the War Hawk didn't, in fact, shut down that division. He asked in a manner that said that he already knew the answer to the question. No, he did not. The first thing that Naruto did after meeting with Hiruzen was to come back to his home and change his clothing into that of his casual one. After changing into a casual long-sleeved orange t-shirt and a pair of black cargo pants, he decided to visit the address that Hiruzen had given to Satsuki, which he knew thanks to his enhanced vision. However, just as he went outside the door, he was greeted by a masked shinobi Jonin with silver hair that seemed to defy gravity in a way that he himself could. The Jonin lifted his hand upwards slightly and greeted him with two simple letters, Yo. Naruto reciprocated kindly with the same gesture, Hi. May I help you? He asked as he walked closer to him, knowing that he had seen him before, he was one of Enko Mitarashi's friends. I think we have not been properly introduced to one another. The man said as he extended his hand, My name's Hitaki Kakashi, you might know me as, one of Enko's friend, perhaps. Naruto smiled and said, Actually, yes, that's how I recognized you. Confirming Kakashi's assumption, is there something that you want? He asked of him, thinking that he must have some sort of purpose in coming to his house specifically. Might we speak somewhere else? Naruto's compliance made him follow Kakashi instead of going to the address. The reason as to why he agreed to follow Kakashi was simple, he was intrigued. The man's tone of voice indicated that he wanted to talk to him about something that he thought is important. He took him to a dumpling restaurant for breakfast, and now he and the man with the appearance that was undoubtedly inspired by a scarecrow were sitting at a table where they were waiting for their orders. So, Naruto began, what is it that you want to talk about, Kakashi-san? Your abilities. Kakashi started, they are generated by chakras, are they not? He asked. Naruto's mind had plotted a path which this conversation would likely go to, but for the sake of continuing, he said, yes, they are. I was born with a genetic anomaly that changed the way that my chakra manifests itself, giving me powers such as enhanced strength, durability, flight, and so on. I see. Kakashi said. His lack of surprise was an indication that he already suspected it. With this difference, Naruto-san, are you still able to perform any ninjutsu or genjutsu? He asked next. To an extent, I suppose. Naruto answered rather uncertainly, but even though I am able to use some, I don't tend to rely on any of them because I'm actually quite bad at them. Then I guess that's where we differ. The statement halted Naruto's train of thought, and now, it was going through a track that began to examine the implication of what Kakashi said and he came to the conclusion that, are you saying that you have superpowers? Kakashi nodded. Yes. He answered, at least I think I have. It all started at about 8 years ago, I think, where my affinity towards electricity took a rather strange turn. Now this is something else. Being a shinobi that has an elemental affinity to lightning did not prepare Kakashi at all for what his body was suddenly able to do. He looked at the dead lamp on the ceiling of his apartment with confusion apparent in his visage. At first, he was just stretching his arms upwards when he felt as if his hands were stung, and it was accompanied by a buzzing sound that lasted for about half a second. His curiosity winning over him, he extended his hands towards the light bulb and somehow, an arc of lightning shot out of the light bulb and went to his hands. It lasted for a second before the lamp suddenly burst into pieces and the light died down. Then, he heard noises from the apartments adjacent to his own. Hey, what the hell? How come the everything just went off out of nowhere? At first, I thought nothing of it, but after a while, I tried to experiment on this some more. Kakashi explained further. Like what? Naruto asked, somewhat curious due to him being reminded of how he used to experiment with his powers during the time where he first found out. As it turned out, the strange lightning phenomena that he exhibited did not work when he tried to replicate what he did with hand seals. Though he could still use all of his jutsus, controlling anything besides lightning felt strange somehow, as if it wasn't what he was supposed to do. It was as if his bodily instincts were uncomfortable with the notion of controlling the other elements. However, as far as lightning jutsu is concerned, he had nothing to worry about as his control over it seemed to increase. So then, he tried another method, which was to focus on his chakra without the use of hand seals. The result was something that was quite exquisite. It was like holding nature's lightning on the palm of my hands. Kakashi answered, even though we called the element as lightning, our degree of control over it compared to how it occurs in nature is staggeringly inferior. But what I held back then, it was somewhat terrifying. Quote. You had my curiosity, Kakashi-san. But now, you have my attention. Naruto said with a serious and curious tone of voice, will you show me, Kakashi-san? Here are your orders, sir. Looking at the 2 bowls of soup with wonton and soup spoon on it made Kakashi chuckle before he picked his spoon and said, well, let's eat this first, shall we? I am rather hungry. Taking a look at the soup dumpling, Naruto acquiesced as he took his spoon and began to eat his breakfast. It was quite tasty, as he found out. Makoto-san, what do you think about this one? Fu asked the elder of the 2 Uchiha as she showed her a black t-shirt with a sleeve that only covered a part of her shoulders. When Satsuki exited the building with Fu, she was greeted by her mother, who asked her about what she was doing and who the green-haired girl was, which the aforementioned green-haired girl divulged with quite a gusto while omitting the Jinchuriki part, though she assumed that her mother was more than just smart enough to deduce that there was something more. After all, her mother was once a kunoichi. And considering of how the members of their clan once said about her reputation, she must have been a very skilled, smart one. Afterwards, Makoto looked at her daughter with an amused smile and told her that she would like to help out in picking clothes. Inwardly, Satsuki knew the reason as to why she offered her help. Makoto once told her that she was not one to care for the aesthetic element of clothes and that she would buy it as long as it was comfortable to be worn. Thinking that there would be no harm in it, she accepted. It looks pretty good, but don't you think it's a bit tight? Fu, as it turned out, had no sense of what a presentable clothing might be, let alone those that were aesthetically pleasing. Her choices in clothing consisted of things that one would call as rejects. Also, they discovered that her tank top and black shorts was literally the only clothing that she had in Taki. Considering that she told them she wore them every day, it looked remarkably clean. Which was quite impressive, since she added that it had been like this for years. So Makoto took it upon herself to give the girl some clothes. She even added her own ryu to the amount that the Hokage had given Satsuki. And now, Satsuki sat at one of the chairs in the store as she watched her mother acting as if she was the store clerk, recommending many articles of clothing to the green-haired girl who was more than happy enough to oblige her. Satsuki understood that sometimes, she was not like other girls. She was not like Sakura or Ino, who could be concerned by how they looked, and perhaps, her only equal in this department was Tenten, who, like her, shared her lack of concerns over how a certain clothing looked on her or how a makeup would accentuate her beauty. Hell, even now, she found herself bored, and silently, she thanked her mother for her turned out to be needed intervention. Now, because of her relaxed position, her mind drifted to the subject of Naruto. I guess he must be at his home by now, she thought to herself. Naruto saw as the man named Kakashi summoned an arcing electricity and maintained it in the palm of his right hand without any hand seals and just using good old-fashioned, though a bit unorthodox, focus of his conscious mind. This is a small scale of my power, Kakashi said before he grunted a bit. And then, his whole body produced massive discharge of electricity, and Naruto could see that his veins were glowing with eerie blue color. In addition to that, he could see that Kakashi was affecting the area around him. The grass in which they were standing somehow began to deteriorate at a slow pace because of the electric field that he was expanding. Then, he extended his right hand towards a tree, and a bolt of blue-shaded lightning shot out of his hand with a loud thundering noise and hit the tree, creating a hole with a diameter of at least 60 centimeters that went through the tree from the spot where it hit. The area surrounding the hole was also burnt, but surprisingly, the tree itself did not catch on fire. The shot was precise and purpose-filled. And Naruto was very impressed with what he saw. Wow. Electricity manipulation at this degree is amazing. Kakashi smiled, something that Naruto noticed thanks to the creases that he made on his mask when he did so. It wasn't as if the mask could really hide his face from his eyes. And then he said to him, "This isn't all that I can do, you know." He then knelt down and took a piece of small grass and lifted it up slightly to show him. After placing his right hand over the grass that he had taken, he said to Naruto, "If I concentrate enough, I can also do this." It took 6 seconds of mental exertion, but when Naruto saw it with his enhanced eyes, he was surprised. Kakashi disintegrated the grass completely. It exploded into microscopic-sized particles, but to a pair of normal eyes it seemed to vanish so suddenly. "You deconstructed its structure," Naruto said, in awe at what he saw. "You destroyed its basic components through manipulation of electric field. Such a thing. It only works on very small things though," Kakashi said to him, "and even then, I need to touch the object and concentrate a lot, so it's a novelty skill at best. But if it were improved, it might. The destructive possibility that this skill has scares me." Kakashi interrupted, "If it's going to get powerful with time, then I'll live with it, but I won't cultivate it on purpose." That shut Naruto up. True, in his enthusiasm over the extent of the technique that Kakashi developed, he was going to suggest training it so that it could be improved, but after what Kakashi said, he came to the realization on how scary this ability was if it were much more powerful. Besides, this power of mine has a lot of other uses than just this, Kakashi informed him. Naruto nodded and smiled before he said, "I have some time to spare. Let's see all that you have." Kakashi's power was a bit more versatile than some of his own, this he had to admit. The techniques that he possessed with his ability to have an innate, powerful grasp on the element of lightning or electricity, to the point where he could control his impulses. He proved that one by telling Naruto to direct the fastest punch that he could procure to his head and stop at 5 millimeters from touching him. He did even better as he directed the punch to his groin, and saw that he didn't react by controlling the electrical impulse shot from his brain. Though he did express his discomfort afterward, and told him that he really thought he was going to lose his family jewels, for a second. After a quick apologize and Kakashi's acceptance, they continued on, showing that Kakashi's ability to rein in electricity was similar in a way to a shinobi, but in other ways, it was a lot different. He was a superhuman. But even though Naruto was certain, he suggested that Kakashi should get an examination that would determine the presence of the genetic anomaly in his genes that allowed him to develop such powers. Kakashi mulled as he cupped his chin, "I assume that we have to tell the Hokage about this." "Well, of course," Naruto said, "I'm assuming that there would be another session of medical examination now that Tsunade's here. The old man might have not told me anything about that, but I have some quite likely assumption regarding that. In that case, then I'll certainly do so," Kakashi answered, "though we don't have to hurry this all up, do we?" After all, we have an ample amount of time. Naruto chuckled and said, hey, yeah. Still, I'll mention your name to the old man. To think that I met another superhuman, 3 times in the span of 3 days no less. He remarked. I suppose I am a part of your team then, Naruto. Kakashi asked with a smile, and that despite my age and rank, I still have to refer to you as my captain. He asked with amusement apparent in his expression and tone of voice. Naruto shrugged and said, I suppose, but I prefer that you call me by my given name. Still, you're not a part of any team in particular at this moment. Kakashi shook his head in negative. The last time I am a part of any team was a couple of years ago, when I'm still considered as an Anbu. Now, I'm just a humble jonin. Still, your team is not exactly an officially sanctioned one, isn't it? Yeah, we're more of a informally sanctioned club, I suppose. But the old man does allow its existence as much as he allows the existence of any shinobi team. The scarecrow extended his hand as a gesture of acceptance and said, then I would be glad to join your team. Naruto smiled widely and kindly reciprocated the gesture that Kakashi gave him. With a pleased tone of voice, the blonde then said back to him, welcome aboard, Kakashi-san. Afterwards, they let go of each other's hands. The silver-haired man felt as if he was talking to a significantly younger form of his late teacher when he was faced with Naruto. There were a lot of things that he inherited from his father that every second he spent looking at him made Kakashi think that he had returned to the past. Sure, their voices were not similar, and not to mention that Naruto had whiskers and that his hair was not as spiky as his father's was, but he felt as if he were standing in the presence of the fourth Hokage. It brought both sadness and happiness to his heart, knowing that Naruto possessed the quality that made Namikaze Minato so revered: powers, personality, likability. If only he knew, he thought to himself in slight sadness. If only Kakashi knew what Naruto knew. Anyway, I should go. I wanted to go somewhere else before you came at my door and I think it's quite overdue, considering that it's nearly noon. Naruto said before he patted Kakashi's shoulder. Thank you for showing me your superpower, Kakashi-san. Before Naruto could fly away, Kakashi said something that stopped him. Wait. One last thing before you leave. Naruto turned to the scarecrow, and saw that he was a bit more serious than before. Yes. Naruto said, suggesting for him to continue. I know about your status as a Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi. Kakashi informed him, which made his eyes widen. Before he could ask, he explained how he came to this information. I was there when you defeated the Kyuubi. I recognize the similarity between your tattoo and the seal that once kept the beast at bay. Kakashi raised his right hand as an assuaging gesture, but you can have my word that I will not divulge this to anyone. And as to how I know, well, that is an answer that I will give for another time. But I'm sure that you can deduce it by yourself. He then did a 2-finger salute before saying, goodbye for now, Naruto. Then he directed his open palms towards the ground and gathered a lot of electrical energy there that created 2 powerful air pressures through the heat that it created that pushed Kakashi towards the sky. Naruto looked up, and he saw him directing his body towards the direction of the village, and then he directed the palms of his hands to the back side of his body and redid what got him off the ground and blasted himself off, leaving Naruto alone in the clearing. The clearing which they had been occupying would have been pretty indistinctive if it weren't for the fact that there were 3 wooden posts that were there for reasons that escaped Naruto. He assumed that Kakashi held some memories of this place, but he did not know for sure. Still, I like him, Naruto said to himself. And inadvertently, to the beast inside of him, in a non-sexual way I assume. Are you a bi by any chance, Naruto? He asked in amusement and was there a slight curiosity to his question? Naruto's answer was to laugh a bit and said, I meant in a, he's kind of cool, kind of way. Though I'd agree that he looked rather handsome beneath that mask, I don't find him sexually attractive. Aesthetically speaking, maybe, he admitted. When all that he got from the Kyuubi next was a guttural chuckle, Naruto replied with, ha ha, don't take my statement and twist it into something that goes with your biased assumptions, Kyuubi. With that, he flew off towards the address of Fu's new apartment, fully intent to see the girl's roommate whom he hoped was friendly enough. He was quite worried of her, like a man who would be worried of his affable and somewhat childish friend. The girl gets to your heart pretty easily, huh? Kyuubi asked Naruto. Yeah. Naruto responded back with a slight sigh to his voice, conveying his fondness over the girl. Still, hearing what she had experienced. Who wouldn't? Oh, I could name a few people. Kyuubi replied back. Still, I think you know who this roommate of hers might be. The blonde landed in front of the three-story apartment rather quietly, then, he entered the building and walked up the stairs to reach the apartment room that was written on the paper. As he walked, Naruto replied back, I have an idea. The old man's kind of giving it away with saying that an apartment has been arranged for her. Room number 104. He stopped right in front of the door and, out of respect for her privacy, if she really were Fu's roommate, he knocked the door. His answer came not due to her opening the door, but her voice coming out from inside. Who is it? She asked, with a tone of voice that could be considered as rude. It's Naruto. He replied back calmly, contrasting the way that she asked it. Oh. Hang on, I'll open the door. He heard the sound of the locks being opened, of which there were two, and then, the door was opened and there was Tayuya, wearing a white sleeveless t-shirt and a pair of black shorts that reached her knees, a set of clothing that was definitely better than the one that she had when he first met her. Hi. Naruto greeted with a smile that would make his fangirls. Yes, he's aware of their existence thanks to Shikamaru, and he's deeply thankful that they were rather quiet and reserved about it. Swoon. Quote. Hey. Tayuya said back as she turned her head away slightly so as to not meet his gaze directly. What you doing here? She asked of him. I want to see how you're doing. Naruto answered before he added, and to inform you that you will get a roommate. What? Tayuya asked, caught by surprise by the news that he had brought to her door. Nobody told me anything about that, are you sure? Shit, at least tell me they're not some sort of loudmouth or something like that. Well, that's what I'm here for, to tell you some things about her. Naruto answered before he asked her, can we talk inside? She seemed hesitant at first, as apparent when she mumbled, ah. And then turning to see the state of the room before turning back to Naruto with a shrug, finding no problem with it, yeah, sure. But don't expect me to pour you some tea or something cause, I haven't got the chance to buy them. She said as she sidestepped so that Naruto could get in. No problem, there's no need to be so courteous. Naruto said as he walked inside the apartment room. I'm not a demanding guest, you know. Tayuya smirked and said this as she closed the door. Lucky for me then. In the end, the clothes shopping that Makoto, Fu and Satsuki were partaking in allowed Fu to have a number of new clothes that consisted of shirts, t-shirts, pants, shorts, skirts, and some. And, because Makoto was there, she bought some clothes for Satsuki as well. Thank you so much for that Makoto-san. Fu enthusiastically proclaimed to the Uchiha matriarch as she carried the bags that contained her clothing with her two hands. You're really lucky Satsuki, to have a kind, beautiful mother. She said to the matriarch's daughter. Oh, you're exaggerating Fu. Makoto said, though despite her statement, she did look rather pleased, and it earned her a deadpan look from her daughter. No, I'm not exaggerating. Fu stated rather firmly, you've been kind to me, even though that you have nothing that forces you. And you really are beautiful for a mother. She praised her once again. This time, Makoto merely took it without any sort of half-hearted protest and just let herself be content with what she said. Looking at this from the sidelines, Satsuki saw as Fu was slowly stealing her mother's heart. She had no problem with it, considering that there was a possibility that Fu might not have any parental figure in her life and that Makoto was the first older figure that took her time to tend to her, even if it was only shopping her clothes. It was better to have loved or been loved and lost them rather than to never have experienced them in the first place. Perhaps there was a truth to that saying. In a short time, they reached the address that the Hokage had given to them. Entering the building and walking up the stairs, they walked until they reached the door marked 104. Here, let me knock the door. Satsuki said to Fu as she lifted her hand to prepare to knock the door. But before her hand even reached it, the door was opened. And they were greeted by Naruto in his casual wear, hello. We heard you coming, come in. Though Makoto was slightly confused and Satsuki was surprised, Fu merely nodded with a smile and entered without hesitation. Makoto was the second one to enter, and Satsuki was the last, as she was really befuddled by Naruto's presence in the room. When they went inside into the living room, they were greeted by the sight of a red-headed young woman sitting at one of the 6 chairs surrounding the circular-shaped wooden table. Instead of herself, Naruto was the one to introduce her to the others. Everyone, this is Tayuya. Tayuya, this is Makoto Uchiha, Satsuki Uchiha, and your roommate, Fu. He said, moving his hand to the ones that he introduced. Ah, so she's my roommate. Tayuya remarked, hello, I suppose. Welcome to the apartment. It's not much, but it's home I guess. She said rather drowsily, as if it didn't interest her in any way. Nice to meet you Tayuya. Fu replied with a bright smile that contrasted Tayuya's bored visage. Hey. Anyway, your room's there, and mine's there. Tayuya explained as she pointed out the rooms. If you want, you can get those clothes organized or whatever now. Fu nodded and then she moved to her own room, leaving Tayuya with Makoto and Satsuki. Satsuki turned to Naruto and said, Naruto, do you know her? She asked due to his presence in the room. Yes. I met her during our trip with Jiraiya. It happened when you were asleep, so I suppose an explanation is in order. And so he sat with Tayuya and Satsuki and Makoto followed suit, the latter was quite intrigued herself. Then, he explained everything, from Tayuya infiltrating the room that they were staying at, her demand to know what they are and so on. Then after knowing that she was a superhuman with the ability to manipulate sound, Satsuki exclaimed, oh. So that's why the Hokage said so soon when we told him about Fu. Naruto smiled at how Satsuki caught up on that and said, yup. Wait, what? Tayuya asked, no doubt getting the hidden implication, are you saying that my roommate is also like me? Like us? She asked as she pointed to Naruto, Satsuki and herself in quick succession. Naruto's answer was to nod, and that made Tayuya raise her eyebrows, finding the situation somewhat surreal. Wow, talk about a small world we live in. Yes. That and Naruto added one more thing to raise the tension of the room. I also just found another superhuman, right here in our village. And with that, the conversation escalated. Meanwhile, Makoto remained calm as she seemed content being an observer. Then, Fu came along and increased the intensity of the conversation and she couldn't help but thought. For a group of people that just know each other, they are rather quick to come to friendly terms with one another, she remarked mentally. They were talking with one another as if they had known each other longer than they actually were. Such a thing was quite rare, perhaps not including a group of people with similar interests. While they do share a similarity that made them different from the others, such innate traits would rarely ensure that they would get along, but they seem to be able to connect with one another in such a short time. Perhaps this is some kind of innate superpower that they share with one another. The ability to establish bonds at a much faster pace to one another. She wondered. She humored the thought due to how it could allow them to establish connection with one another easier. If only that were true of the shinobi, she remarked to herself. Still, I get why the Hokage think of them as symbols of hope for a better future. Makoto and Hiruzen had been in contact with one another ever since her child was included into the team, just like any of the members' parents. She recalled that there was a meeting between all of them after the Kyuubi attack, and there were a couple of parents who were deeply worried over their child, for example, Shiho's mother, who was worried over her daughter's safety. Hiruzen acknowledged her concerns, and the concerns of the others, but he argued that at the time, she was protected by her teammates, the heroes of Konoha, who were strong and capable of keeping her safe, and no doubt, they would ensure her safety just like any other teammates. Her concern was understandable for Makoto. After all, she was there when Shiho was the first that was attacked by the mutated men, but the way that her companions leapt to prevent her from being attacked spoke volumes about the length that her friends were willing to go to ensure the safety of each of their own. In fact, she recalled that Shiho showed resolve to retaliate after Sakura punched the mutated man across the distance by taking out the alien sidearm and shot him in concordance to her daughter using her superpower as well to attack him. If she were given proper training and skills, she would be a deadly combatant. Tinkering with alien technology was not something that a member of a less advanced society should do. Not unless said member had the memories of the schematics of the alien tech and enough creativity to actually make something out of it. Okay. Now to put it around my palm and there. Shiho exclaimed as she finished her creation, a mechanical hodgepodge that looked like a mechanical harness designed to be strapped around the wrist and palm. The harness possessed some kind of circular lamp located on the palm section, and she targeted it towards the one who was inside the ship besides her. Ta-da! Shikamaru kept his impassive visage intact in contrast to Shiho's expression, which was filled with elation. Undeterred by this, Shiho then said, "Kinda fancy, huh? This is a little invention I call Palm Blaster. Using the mechanism that these Kryptonians used for their weapons, I made it so that if I ever got in mortal danger, I could just whip out my hand and bam. Direct hit. Hee, what do you think?" Quote. Very impressive. With just 2 words of praise from his mouth made Shiho laugh and blush, ahaha. I know, right? I mean, not to be arrogant or anything, but modifying their technology isn't really easy, you know. There are a lot of things involved that. Shikamaru said, and it stopped her tirade. Naruto told me that you had another one of your false memory that you are reluctant to discuss. Is this why you have some difficulty in sleeping until it comes to you through exhaustion? Shiho's excitement plummeted from cloud 9 to the desolate ground down below in a matter of seconds. Shikamaru had decided to wait until she was at a happier state to ask her. Ever since he was told this, Shikamaru made it his job to observe her, and he came up with a conclusion that what she saw was so disturbing that she was reluctant to say it to anybody. You can tell me. In fact, while we're at it, you can tell any one of us. Shikamaru said to her, his tone of voice calm, yet cold, detached. Something that Shiho had always noticed and regarded him as a cool person because of it, but what is it about this particular memory that makes you so troubled? At first, Shiho did not answer. Her gaze was directed at anything that wasn't him, most prominently, the floor that they were standing on. The level of disturbing content that this memory had must be quite high if she was reluctant to say it. The last time this happened was the Kyuubi attack, correct? Shikamaru asked her, having heard the story from Naruto 1 month ago, what you said foreshadowed what would happen. Except without as much death toll that the false memory suggested. So if you tell me what this one is about, then perhaps, if it were to come to pass, we could be there to prevent or to stop it from being as bad as what you have seen. Though this did kill off some bits of her hesitance, she remained silent. But, she decided to at least tell him a bit, what I saw was not death or deaths per se, but it was something that, in my opinion, a lot worse than death. He didn't. Oh, whatever the language rule or the proper tense is, he does not deserve that fate. Just thinking about it made her stomach churn and her expression to go somber. And she was quite annoyed at Shikamaru for bringing it up after she was just beginning to get over it. I won't apologize. It is necessary for me to ask, said Shikamaru. Oh great, now you're a telepath like Ino too. Shiho said rather crossly to him. Perhaps we should discuss this some other time then, said the Nara, noticing that he won't get anywhere with her at this current state. Whatever it was that got you spooked needed to be known. Even if it brings you pain to think it. For now, if you'd still allow me, I will remain here as you tinker about. Quote. Please get out, Shiho said as she pointed to the door. Shikamaru nodded and began to make way to the door. But he was stopped when Shiho said, It's hard, you know. If you'd seen it, you would understand. But I didn't. Shikamaru replied back evenly, and therefore, I do not understand. I am not content in leaving things as they were for now, but sooner or later. This false memory must come to light. Surely you realize that. And with that, he left, and Shiho took a deep breath before shakily release them all in one go. Though she was a bit shaken by Shikamaru's bluntness, she understood that this was something that she should relay to the others. Still, with that image looming in her head, she didn't know if she were ready yet. Perhaps she could let her fear go through tinkering with the machinery wonders from the alien world of Krypton. Yes, that seemed enticing enough. However, as she began to go to work improving the mechanical apparatus that she had created, she was more determined to tell them of what she saw, especially to Naruto. It did involve him after all. Satsuki had her alien in origin uniform slung over her right shoulder as she wore the short-sleeved black t-shirt and a pair of blue cargo pants that she had chosen to buy from the store that she, her mother and Fu visited. Though she did get some critique from her mother for choosing such plain clothing, she didn't care as it was very comfortable in her opinion. It didn't matter if they looked unflattering on her, they were comfortable and that was why they were chosen. She was asked to change after Fu began to complain rather childishly about having no uniform that she could use. She took the bag containing the clothes, went to the Tayuya girls' bathroom and changed her clothes to the so-called unflattering ones that she had bought. The conversation leading to Fu's protest over the lack of uniform stemmed from their discussion about this Kakashi. They didn't know how or why it diverted to that point, but most of the time, a conversation about one thing could lead to another thing entirely if there were a lot of people involved who had different opinions and views, and so Satsuki wasn't really that confused or troubled. As she walked back to the living room, her entrance made everyone turn and look at her. Besides Makoto, who looked at her with slight disapproval but combined with understanding, Naruto, Tayuya and Fu didn't react adversely, nor did they react in approval after seeing what she wore. She took this as a sign that her attire was okay and sat among the three once again. So, what have you been talking about while I was gone? Naruto's body, answered Fu. Makoto had to stifle her oncoming giggle using her hand as Satsuki sharply turned her head towards the green-haired girl and said with a glare and the flattest tone of voice imaginable, "What?" Tayuya merely chuckled and replied, "Not in that way." As if she knew what she was thinking about. This guy here gave the idea that his body is a living entity separate from his personality. I have heard about that actually. Makoto said, it's some sort of duality religion that was practiced long ago. That the soul or mind and the body are a pair of different entity combined together and make a human whole. That if the body is injured or ill or that the mind is afflicted by mental illness or trauma, the person is not wholly human. I haven't heard about that religion until now. Naruto admitted as much. It was quite ancient. Makoto explained further, and besides that, it's too easy to exploit it. Let's say that I killed someone in a desire for vengeance, I could just say that my mind or soul is afflicted by wrath and therefore I was not really responsible for my actions. It's irresponsible and childish. Wow, sounds like you got something against religion, lady. Tayuya remarked. Makoto smiled pleasantly to Tayuya. However, the redhead flinched at the feeling of dread creeping up her spine that seemed to signal a threat. My, do I seem that way? Forgive me. For the record, I have nothing against religion. It's just that there are so many things in any of the systems that one can exploit for their own benefit. Tayuya felt as if she should apologize to prevent the Uchiha matriarch from ever giving off such hostile aura again, and so she did just that. Oh okay. Sorry. Anyway. Makoto said as he turned to Naruto, what do you mean by your idea, Naruto-kun? Naruto shook off the feeling of dread that the Uchiha matriarch had given to him when she corrected Tayuya and said, well, it's not my idea exactly, it's an idea that my friend hypothesized, that my body possesses a pseudo-personality, a mind of its own, except without the degree of sentience that every humans have. And I think that what he said is true. It was actually Kyuubi's idea, whose sudden shout was so loud that he had forgotten to speak to the beast mentally. Kit, you have to see what I found. Your body is incredible. Apparently, he had been examining the inner workings of his body ever since their connection with one another was augmented. And what he found out was that his body possessed some kind of will to improve, become stronger, and that this process was an independent one that went on in his unconsciousness. When he blurted it out, Naruto had to quickly explain the idea while making the others think that he was not talking to someone invisible who happened to be present somehow. Really? Satsuki asked, her eyes brightened with visible curiosity. How do you know? She asked again. I know it because of what I did too. Should he reveal this? Makoto and Tayuya did not know of his status as a Jinchuriki, and so he was a bit worried that revealing this would cause problems in the long run. But if he had to explain this idea to them, it would be problematic if he did not give an explanation. What I did to the Kyuubi. At this, Makoto's gaze turned serious while Tayuya was confused. Satsuki and Fu understood what he meant and waited for him to continue, as did Tayuya and Makoto, who wanted him to elaborate. Absorbed the Kyuubi at the end of our battle. Naruto answered. Whoa, hold on. Tayuya said as she raised her hand to halt him from speaking any further, did I hear that right? You fucking fought the Kyuubi. The demon fox who is said as the bringer of calamity itself. And that you absorbed it. Makoto was silent, but her mind was riddled with questions. And when she saw that her daughter was not shocked or surprised, she knew that she had known of this before he revealed it just now. It was rather funny. Knowing that her friend's son now shared the same fate that was given to his mother, when she once said to Makoto that being a Jinchuriki was something that she did not want to happen to anyone, let alone her own son. Yeah, that's what I did. Naruto answered. Still, back to the topic, I did not want to absorb the Kyuubi, it was not my intention. Though the Kyuubi did push his very being into me, it was my body that kept him inside. I only knew of his existence days after his defeat. He air quoted, I suppose the duality theory is true to an extent. The mind and the body are two different entities, or at least it really is like that in my case. Still, the mind is still in control over the body, no? Makoto asked. Well, yes. My identity is a product of my mind, and so is every single one of my conscious efforts to do something, but my body has its own process of thinking that it possesses. Naruto answered, I don't know if it has a purpose, but judging by what it did, I think it's keeping me safe. And as a result of that, it keeps getting me more powerful. Are we like you as well, Naruto? Wait, are all other humans like you? With two entities comprised into one? Fu asked. Her curiosity were very piqued by Naruto's theory. I don't know. Naruto answered truthfully. Still, I don't think that they are. Kit. Answered the beast from within. Your mother didn't even have the same composition of the mind and body as you do. I think. Yes, that's more likely. I think that this is a unique case. And that this would mean that you. Oh ho ho. The potential, Kit. It's endless. Okay, stop with the mad scientist vibe. It's really unnerving coming from you. Naruto said to the beast, and what do you mean by that? Are you saying that my body is the reason that I am able to adapt to any situation and generate more energy? The opposite. I think that your energy causes this duality to materialize in the first place. And that your body can do more with this energy if your mind orders it to. And on the top of my head, I'm thinking about manipulating your DNA to change your appearance, among other things. Hey, let's forego sleeping tonight and focus on this. This experimenta, I mean these tests are important. Quote. As far as I know, I think I'm the only one with this kind of condition. Naruto answered, relaying what the Kyuubi said to him to them. I might test this out though, see what it means. Naruto said to both the Kyuubi and those around him. Ahahaha. There are lots of possibilities to explore, Kit. I'm going to show just how much more powerful you can become. Somehow, he already regretted agreeing to Kyuubi's suggestion, but he felt as if this was something that needed to be addressed. After all, this was something that he needed to learn about himself, this supposed duality unique to his case. Still, why did he feel as if the Biju had other reasons for doing this other than to help him or to serve his own amusement? Perhaps. Of course. It was very possible that he wanted Naruto to be stronger to fight the figure who used him. This Madara Uchiha must have gotten the beast spooked. And achieving that was not a slouchy feat, considering what he was able to do and his reputation as some sort of demonic entity. Still, it's a shame that you haven't figured out his name. Fu said in slight lamentation. Then, she stopped and tilted her head upwards slightly in a diagonal angle, and then she said, wait what? He's not a he, he's a. Ooh. Well that's interesting. So he's a she. Tayuya looked at Fu and thought that the girl had gone crazy for talking nonsense out of nowhere. Makoto however, took this as an opportunity to ask instead of coming to an assumption, what are you talking about? Kyuubi's a woman. And that made the room go silent. However, in Naruto's mind. Well, I have acquired a liking to taking the form of a woman whenever I want to change my physical self to that of a human. The Kyuubi admitted as much to his host. It's become an inside joke to my siblings. And I'm willing to bet that Shumei just couldn't resist saying that to her. Meanwhile, in an undisclosed location beneath the ground. Kabuto looked at the machinery that riddled his laboratory, that Madara Uchiha, or whoever this person really was, had given to him in exchange for his cooperation, loyalty, and a stronger sense of self-identification provided by the absorption of the wayward Sannin, Orochimaru that was facilitated by him. The technology that he possessed was at a level that surpassed any sort that the hidden villages possessed. It was alien to him, and it took time for Kabuto to familiarize himself with the technology that he had accumulated for over the years filled with pain and struggle, and what he found was that this technology was very, very promising. But I wonder, how did he get these esoteric technology in the first place? No one in the shinobi world has ever seen, let alone create anything like this. The Snake Man thought as he stood in front of a table that projected some sort of interactive projection which he manipulated with his hands. He was surrounded by steel. Or, at least a material similar in appearance to steel, but he could tell that the substance that created them were not steel nor any alloys known to mankind. One reason why he chose to betray his previous master over this, Madara, was that he was far more powerful, plain and simple. He possessed resources from which Orochimaru could not determine the location, he possessed unknown abilities that surpassed the level power of most cages, and he possessed an army of similarly powered men. Though the number of the army was still few, the rest of those who were not as strong as the others that was sent to Konoha were supplied with weapons and armors made out of the terrifyingly advanced technology which Kabuto used at this moment. Kabuto had to admit that he was both impressed and terrified by him. However, his goal in building such a thing was fairly simple and understandable: domination. Ruling the world. Though such a notion was worthy of a laugh due to how cheesy it sounded, it was very understandable for Kabuto. This, Madara, wished for the system to be changed and with him as the leader. Whatever it was that motivated him to do this, Kabuto did not really care. For now, he was content in working with such wonderful, marvelous pieces of seemingly alien technology. Though I do wonder where he got it from. Kabuto thought as he ceased the existence of the hologram with a clap of his hands similar to how someone might close the drapes on a window. Then when the light of the hologram was gone, the rest of the room were brightened, allowing one to see that it was a large, circle-shaped room with 6 tubes filled with strange, turquoise-shade liquid that could easily fit a normal human being. Only one of them were opened instead of sealed by metal that blocked Kabuto from seeing what was inside of it. And on the opened tube, there was a body, floating inside of it, and Kabuto gazed upon the body. The body was that of a young girl, brown hair, purple-colored face paint on her cheeks, and she appeared to be quite healthy. "How is she?" said the voice of Madara, coming up from behind Kabuto's back. "She's doing well," Kabuto said. "Her vital signs are weak, but active, and she's responding to mental stimulants. Her daily intake of nutrition provided by the microscopic-sized machines within her and the liquid is enough to sustain her for an indefinite amount of time." Madara walked towards the young girl and was fixated by her for a minute. Then, he turned to Kabuto. "Give her acceleration kick, she is healthy enough to not be affected adversely by its effects. Increase her nutrition intake afterwards and inform me if anything happens in the next 2 hours. Kabuto nodded and said, "I shall." With that, the man left, and Kabuto wondered who this girl might be, as it seemed that she was very important to this, Madara. To the point that he was not willing to let her stay dead. Though he told me that this is a mere secondary goal. I find myself not believing his word. His action speaks louder than what he says, he thought to himself. But it didn't matter. He was quite content in experimenting with the technology and the resources that he had given him. The white-skinned men in particular were very fascinating subjects, dreamy subjects even, dare he say it, considering their easily malleable biology and the sheer amount of potential that they possess, being what they were. Then, there was the new subject that he had integrated into what the Uchiha had taken a liking to call, the Source. A Jinchuriki that he had personally faced and taken away for the purpose of redirecting the Biju's energy inside him and converging it with the artifact that he had found. Kabuto had spent time in collecting samples from the flash clone of the man that Madara had created due to the fact that his body had to be purged immediately, and he was quite ecstatic in seeing what being a Biju could actually do to a man and how he could modify it so that it could fit his purpose. After what happened with the Kyuubi, Madara did not want to take any chances with the others. However, with the team that was supposed to extract the seven-tail missing, it seemed that his plan had to be revised for a bit. The next one will either be number 1 or number 5. Kabuto assumed as he began to leave the restoration chamber. One of them is but a child and the other is a lone wolf that has left the protection of the village like number 8 and 4. Either one of them would be an easy target. The night had fallen, and with it, Konoha was illuminated only by the light reflected by the moon and the artificially made light coming from the houses and the street lamps of the village. In one of these houses, Naruto was alone as he stood in front of a mirror, still in his orange t-shirt but had changed his cargo pants with a pair of boxers. He is rendered mute by what he was seeing after agreeing to Kyuubi's suggestion of letting him manipulate the genetic makeup of his body. Crimson hair, green eyes, lack of whiskers. It was as if he was staring at someone else, but the facial structure of his reflection betrayed the true identity of this person. Quote. So I can change the color of my hair and my eyes along with getting rid of the whiskers, but anything else is somewhat impossible. Naruto asked. It seems so. Your genes are not so malleable after all in this circumstance, so let's scrap the idea of having a perfect henge superpower, yeah. Naruto shrugged in response as he found the extent of his shapeshifting ability to be more than enough. Sure. What's next then, Kyuubi? Now try turning it off and on by yourself. Here, let me give you an idea on how. Sharing a body allowed the Kyuubi to transfer concept and methods far easier, as their minds were linked to one another, so if one wanted to give a knowledge to the other, they could do so by transferring the information through their link, similar to Ino's power. After receiving the knowledge needed, he closed his eyes and willed himself to change back, and then his hair and eyes turned back to their usual color, and along with that, his whiskers. Then, he changed the color of his hair and eyes to red and green respectively again before he turned them back to normal, satisfied with the result. Good, now let's see. Oh yes. This should be most interesting. Take deep breath and close your eyes, this is going to be quite a doozy. Though Naruto frowned at the overly excited tone that the beast was using, he complied with little protest. This transformation was a bit different than before. When he changed the color of his hair and eyes and making his whiskers recede, Naruto felt some trickles of ignorable pain on the affected area that barely bothered him. This time, he felt as if he were being submerged in a liquid that possessed high viscosity that rubbed every crevice of his body in a way that made him uncomfortable and comfortable at the same time somehow. His mind was, as much as he would hate to admit this later on, a bit mushy as he let the transformation happen. It took a minute, and at the end of it, Naruto felt tired for some reason, and also a bit flustered. There. Now go and look in the mirror, Kit, said the Kyuubi with such glee audible in his tone of voice. Naruto slowly opened his eyes, and when he saw what he assumed to be himself in the mirror, he let his jaw slacken wide opened. Wah. What the? How? What? In the mirror that reflected what he appeared to be, Naruto saw. Of all things, a young woman of his own age with so much physical resemblance to himself in terms of hair and eye color and the whiskers. However, her hair was a bit longer as it reached her upper back, and that she was quite top-heavy. It didn't help that his shirt happened to snug against the young woman's body as well. However, Naruto was not stupid. He knew who the woman is, and why he was seeing her in the mirror. Because she was him. Kyuubi. What the hell? Naruto said with a higher tone of voice, a womanly tone of voice even, one that was surprisingly rich and quite deep, but not as deep as his voice before. The gender change. Oh, why are you angry? You look good, Kit, you should be proud of that. Why the hell should I be proud of this? I'm a guy, damn it. And I would like for me to remain that way. Oh, stop with identifying yourself with the gender that you were born with. Kyuubi said rather dismissively, if you have such an ability, and that your female self is drop-dead gorgeous, then it's something you should be proud of, not ashamed of. Naruto really did not want to argue with him, he just wanted to change back, whatever, just tell me how to turn this off. And he swore to never use it again. Kyuubi's answer was rather simple and direct, no. Quote. No. Naruto asked in a low volume. No. Kyuubi said to him again rather impertinently, not until you learn to appreciate the fact that if you had been born a girl, you would have been regarded as one of the most beautiful thing to have existed. And, that it would be fine if you were tempted to do it again. Naruto withheld a growl as he said, Kyuubi, this is not the time to try and impart such notions on me. Transform me back, damn it. All he got was silence. Kyuubi. He tried to call him again, Kyuubi. Again, to no avail. Unwilling to be okay with the notion that he was stuck for the time being because the beast had decided to cut off their mental connection, Naruto closed his eyes and tried to do the same thing that he did to change his hair and eye color. When he did so, he opened his eyes. And he saw that all that he did was to change his hair to crimson red and his eye color to purple, but he remained a woman still. You know, you look good that way too. Kyuubi. In comparison to Konohagakure, after the Third Shinobi World War, Kumo still kept its society properly, tightly militarized and orderly, as if they were gunning up for some kind of an inevitable war to break out at any moment. So when the group that accompanied the Raikage, came to Konoha's gate to rendezvous with Konoha's group led by Hiruzen, the ones accompanying the old monkey could see the sheer aura of authority and discipline that they carried. Not to mention the sheer muscle volume that the massive Raikage exhibited due to his open jacket that showed the dense muscles of his chest and abdomens. When Hiruzen and met face to face, they met not only as the leaders of their respective villages, but also as the veterans of the Second and the Third Shinobi War respectively, wars that had cost their villages many things, and leaving scars that undoubtedly remained on them, be it physical or mental. Hokage. Said evenly without a gesture that conveyed either respect or its opposite. Raikage. Hiruzen replied back, welcome to Konoha. We all appreciate your willingness to come here yourself and. The Raikage raised his hand to halt the Hokage from speaking any further, and then he said, let us get to the point. We have much to discuss and too little time to spare. Let's retreat to the meeting room that you have prepared for us. Hiruzen knew that the Raikage was desperate about something. Now he knew that this offer for peace was not something that he made just out of some kindness on his heart. Though he had assumed this to be the case long before, his assumption was now proven to be true. He kept himself composed, he nodded and said, very well. Follow us to the conference room. The two group of shinobi walked side by side, and the civilians gave them a wide berth, as they were quite afraid of the Raikage's large size and his indomitable bearing. The physicality of Kumogakure shinobi had always been something that they were proud of, and it was clear that because of their militarization, they did not become lenient in maintaining their physicality. This was a moment that would not be forgotten, no matter what the result was. A Biju could be persistent when they wanted to, and Naruto learned this the hard way. When Satsuki woke up quite early in the morning and responded to a knock on her door, she didn't expect for a rather familiar-looking blonde woman to meet her and said, Hey Satsuki, can I talk with you for a second, and please don't call your mother. Satsuki took some time to scour her mind to remember why she looked so familiar. Until it came to her, and her jaw dropped because of the fact that this young woman was a friend of hers, a good friend, and perhaps a lover of hers, Naruto. She couldn't help but mouth out the question, Wah. How did? Naruto raised her hands to make her stop and said, Please. I've been hiding myself from other people and I really need your help on this. Though she was somewhat hesitant, Satsuki ended up allowing Naruto to enter the house. Without thinking things thoroughly, Satsuki led Naruto to her room and closed the door when they were inside. So, Satsuki was hesitant, as she didn't know how to start with this kind of situation. How exactly did you get into this form? She asked. Naruto sighed as she began to ruffle her lengthened hair in annoyance. Blame it on the Kyuubi. We were testing the potential within me to shapeshift, which I could do to a degree and teach me how to do it afterwards, and then, he changed my gender and. She sighed again before answering, then, he refused to turn me back. Satsuki was both curious and hesitant, and it came out in a form of three-letter question, why? Because I am bothered by this. Naruto said as she gestured to her whole new self, I'm not used to this body. In my mind, I'm still a guy so. He told me that until I learn to be comfortable with this, he won't change me back or tell me how to. The young Uchiha was very much confused and flabbergasted by what her friend said to her. So, are you? I mean, are you used to it? Naruto shook her head, no. So I decided to make a compromise, and he said that if I were to be successful in using a variant of my other power that he could activate on my own, he would change me back. She said. I agreed, and so, I'm here to test this new power. Okay, but what is this power? Satsuki asked, and not that I mind, but why am I involved in this? This variant power is. Kyuubi called it mind melding. Naruto answered, it's similar to Ino's power. I used it before on Tsunade, remember? When I cured her of her phobia. But I'm not that powerful to use it at such a range that she's capable of. I can only use it through skin-to-skin contact. Satsuki blushed at what Naruto said, but before she could stutter a reply, Naruto elaborated further, I didn't mean it in that sense. I just need to place my hand on your head, that's all, no need to do what you seem to be thinking about. It didn't diminish the blush that she sported. After all, now that Naruto knew what she had been thinking, it was far more mortifying compared to how she was before. Oh okay, alright. So, let's just do it, shall we? She just wanted the topic of the conversation to be redirected from the fact that Naruto knew what she was thinking. Okay, take a deep breath, Satsuki. Naruto said before she placed her right hand on the right side of her head, with her thumb placed under her right eye, right on her cheekbone while the rest of her fingers were placed near her ear. And, here I go. For a moment, everything was normal, but in the span of a nanosecond, Satsuki could feel Naruto's presence in her mind as much as she could feel herself within Naruto's mind. It was an experience that she had never felt before. To be connected to someone, really connected, not just mentally like what Ino could do, but also to feel the beats of his heart, the feeling of his skin that she could feel from the electrical signals from his brain that also made Satsuki knew how Naruto was feeling and the knowledge that Naruto could feel the same thing with her as well. A smile was procured on her face, a smile that was not at all restrained, a smile conveying a sense of pure joy. And this smile was shared by Naruto as well, who she still found as attractive, despite the fact that he was still a she. As they were beholding each other's eyes, they didn't hear the sound of footsteps and the door being opened by one Makoto Uchiha who cut herself mid-sentence. Satsuki, I heard some strange noises, what are you? When both girls turned to see the form of the rather shocked Makoto, there was silence. Then, in front of her eyes, Makoto saw as the blonde-haired girl turned into Naruto. And it amplified the awkwardness of the silence that went on and on for at least a minute. Until finally, Naruto released his hand from Satsuki's head, cleared his throat and said with a calm tone of voice. There is a reasonable explanation for what you have just seen, Makoto-san. I hope there is. She responded back with a deadpan tone of voice. Your village seems to have been rebuilt pretty well, Hokage. Reikage remarked as they entered the conference room usually held for meeting between clan heads of Konoha, with the important members of the Hyuga clan present within its walls along with two shinobi of Kumogakure that the Reikage trusted to be his escorts. I have been informed of the Kyuubi attack. Knowing the power of a Biju, I thought that it would take more than just several days for this place to look relatively normal. If you had been informed of the Kyuubi attack, Hokage replied back as he walked towards his seat on the table, then you should know that the one who defeated it provided the much-needed assistance. Ah yes, the Superman. Remarked back as he took a seat, I've heard of him. In fact, rumors had began to spread if my informants are to be believed. About the one who beat a Biju to submission and lived to tell the tale. Not even my father could finish a battle against a Biju in mortal combat without it ending in a draw. Regardless of his abilities, he is not the topic of our discussion, Reikage. Hokage reminded him. If you say so. We are here to talk the custodianship of my brother's pupil. Reikage said before he turned to the clan head of the Hyuga who was sitting beside the leader of Konoha, what you asked was not difficult to ponder, Hyuga. I believe that you know of her status, and that is why you want her. Hiyashi did not deny nor did he confirm Reikage's suspicion. It is my request, Reikage, regardless of my reasons. Ha! Always a level-headed clan you are. Reikage boisterously said offhandedly, anyway. Let us get to the answer. My answer is no. Very direct and concise, even if he were a bit brutally honest in his answer. The Hyuga elders began to protest, but the Reikage smashed his fist and silenced them. Unless, you are willing to help me in return and give me something or someone else to my force to compensate. He added. Help. Elaborate for us, Raikage. Hokage said to the large, muscle-bound man who seemed to be demanding their assistance, as if somewhat desperate, what do you need our help with? The Raikage crossed his arms and said, I require the Superman to do something for me. He offered his term, however, I will only divulge the details to you and the Hyuga head clan. The elders must leave. What? Why should we? Whatever it is you want, we must be here to hear it. Are you trying to make him turn on us? Yelled out an exceptionally irate elder. The large man remained adamant as he went on to say this to the Hokage and ignoring the elders, regardless of your opinion, I will only agree to your terms if your Superman is willing to help me. The first step towards that is for the elders to leave this room and for you two to be the only one who listen to my reasons. Will I be allowed to tell them what it is after this discussion? Hiyashi tried to be a mediator between his clan's elders and the Raikage. Only if you ended up agreeing with me. Raikage offered. They have a right to be here, Raikage. Hokage spoke up. They are a part of the clan that your past subordinate had tried to screw over. They have a right to know the reason why you want the Superman's help. The two leaders of their respective village stared at one another with unrelenting gaze. Until finally, the Raikage clicked his tongue and said, fine. I will tell you of what troubles me. He then placed his elbows on the desk and loosely clasped his hands, Madara Uchiha. The name brought a wave of confusion to people other than the Hokage, the Raikage and his escorts. After all, they did not understand why the name of a long-dead co-creator of the village who turned traitor would spook the Raikage so much. However, to those who knew better, even just for a little bit, they had every right to be disconcerted. I suppose you know who I am talking about, Hokage. But perhaps your knowledge of this man was not more compared to mine. Seeing his implication, the Hokage asked, you met this man before? The Raikage nodded his head with a grim expression on his face, that I have. If I may interrupt, Hiyashi said as he raised his hand, I believe that the rest of us not in the know have lost the conversation ever since you mentioned the name Madara Uchiha. What does the disgraced Uchiha leader from generations ago had to do with this? Not that Madara Uchiha, no. The Raikage responded, it's someone who claimed that he was Madara Uchiha, nothing more than that. However, despite that, the man is powerful. As evidenced by the fact that he had taken my brother from me. Now this was a news that shocked both Hiyashi and Hiruzen. Hiyashi was shocked due to how someone that had taken the name of the fallen co-creator of the village was strong enough to match the real thing by taking a Jinchuriki. Hiruzen was shocked due to how this man seemed to be going ahead with his plan. Whatever it was. Explain. Taken, Raikage. Taken, as in I do not know whether or not I should still be looking for him in the case that he is still alive or I should be mourning his death. Answered the Raikage rather sternly, and his escorts seemed to share his sentiment. The reason I said no to your terms is because I intend to keep me safe, and frankly speaking, I alone am no match for him. His goons, I can handle, but the man himself, no. The large man in charge of Kumogakure then leaned towards the Hokage sitting across him and said, therefore, I need your Superman to help with the endeavor of finding my brother, dead or alive, only after you agree to do so will we be talking again. Abruptly, the Raikage stood and turned his back. I will wait for a day for your answer, Hokage Dono. He said gruffly before he exited the room, ignoring the indignant yells of the Hyuga elder. Makoto was already worried about Kyuubi's influence on Naruto. Even when she was dealing with Kushina, she never once experienced something like this with the red-headed Jinchuriki. Perhaps it was because of the fact that Kushina restrained the beast with severe prejudice, chaining the beast within her and never even once letting it loose even just a little bit, while Naruto let the Kyuubi converse with him and he even went further to try and be courteous to the nine-tailed beast. Hell, he even allowed the beast to tamper with his genes so that he could unlock some powers that he did not know as of yet. When he proved it by turning his hair red and his eyes to green and violet, Makoto was shocked at how it made him look like a male version of Kushina. Albeit, a considerably calmer, more composed, and certainly handsome-looking male counterpart to Kushina Uzumaki. Then he changed his gender again, even with a blush that showed that he was a bit embarrassed by this ability. and Makoto thought that Kushina had returned from the land of the dead in the form of her younger self. Seeing the form brought back so many memories. Memories that she had suppressed when she was married to Fugaku. I see. It seems that you are quite used to it. Being a girl, I mean. She said to Naruto, who was sitting in front of her beside Satsuki. Naruto could only rub the back of her neck and said, to be honest, I am less uncomfortable than I was when he first changed me. In a way, you can see it as me getting used to it. Though it was clear that she wasn't really. But, to be fair, Naruto was very adaptable. Then she turned towards her daughter, and she saw her looking at Naruto with such focus in her eyes that it caught Naruto's attention and made him her, said in a rather rich, womanly voice that suited how she looked right now, Satsuki. Please don't stare at me like that, it's mortifying. Satsuki blushed before she turned away and said, sorry. It looked as if her daughter inherited more than just her looks. Makoto then cleared her throat and said, well, Naruto, please turn yourself back. Gender, facial features and all. Naruto did so with a little bit of concentration. As Naruto felt rather strange, whenever he changed gender to a woman or the other way around, Makoto and Satsuki could see Naruto shivering a bit as he completed the transformation. Then, Makoto continued, I suppose I could understand your reason visiting Satsuki, considering what happened. It must have been quite an experience, changing gender. However, I am worried that the Kyuubi is being too free. Are you sure this is wise? She didn't ask that question because she hated the Biju. She asked that question because she was worried over the possibility of Naruto getting hurt because of this. After all, his decision to cut loose with the Biju made her quite afraid. Kushina was very wary of the Biju inside her, the opposite of what Naruto was doing now. And this worried her so. It's risky, I know. Naruto said with a nod, still, I don't think that the risk is not worth it. The guy's not as hostile as many people have said, and with that said, he's very forthcoming in many things that he knows, so until it is proven otherwise, I'm willing to trust him. Makoto sighed at his open-mindedness, which he also, rather unknowingly shared with his mother. However, was not taught by the very first Kyuubi Jinchuriki, and therefore, it explained his lack of zealous caution regarding the Biju that Kushina exhibited. Very well then, if you decided it to be so, then let it be so. However, you must think of the possible consequences of this choice, Naruto-kun. And your mother would have told you thousands of reasons why this was not a good idea, she thought to herself. Naruto nodded and answered, I will, Makoto-san. He then stood up and said, well, I have inconvenienced you long enough. Satsuki, thank you for your help. You handled it quite cool, and I appreciate that, considering the strangeness of my sudden arrival in that form. Satsuki merely stood up and smiled quite brightly at him, it was no problem. But then she blushed again and said, although you might want to keep this ability a secret for now. You're not really used to it, aren't you? Naruto's grimace told her that Naruto was not, in fact, used to his new ability. Good idea, Satsuki. I think I'm going to keep this one under wraps for now. And with that, Makoto and Satsuki accompanied him to the entrance of their house and saw him leaving. So what do you think of his female self, Satsuki? The question that came from her mother's mouth came so sudden, as if out of nowhere, that Satsuki couldn't help but sputter out and nearly stumble down from nothing in particular before turning back to see her mother's questioning gaze and said, what do you mean? What are you talking about? Why would you ask me that? Are you suspecting something? She asked those questions in the span of 7 seconds without taking a breath. The reaction was all the answer that she needed, and Makoto said, nothing, I'm just curious. She then let her amused smile lingered before she left towards the living room. Satsuki was blushing as she stood there, confused, and became a bit more introspective thanks to what her mother just said. She was especially considering the fact that she was a bit attracted to Naruto's female form, and that could mean. Was she really? When Naruto began to walk towards his house, he noticed that there was a small influx of Kumogakure shinobi around. He heard that the Raikage was coming. Could it be that these were his people that he brought along as escorts? It seemed that they were asking people some questions, and so, he used his augmented hearing to hear them. Quote. Blonde hair, blue eyes, whisk. Wait a minute, that's him right there. They were asking questions about him. He could feel the Kumogakure shinobi's gaze bearing down upon him as he passed by, pretending as if he didn't hear or see them looking at him as he went on his merry way, seemingly oblivious to what was going on while the truth was the exact opposite. He was quite aware of their scrutinizing gaze. However, what he was not aware of was the reason as to why they were doing that in the first place. So, these guys seem to be interested in you. The mentally sent voice was Ino's. It was not surprising, but he did not see her anywhere, and before he could try to, she continued, "Don't try to find me, just walk towards your destination," she said. Naruto complied, but even he had something to say. "So what's the deal? Why are you suddenly being all cryptic?" he asked. "I think they're here for you," Ino said, saying what Naruto already knew, but then she added, "They're here to discuss a treaty with the Hyuga, right? So if they're searching for you, then you might be involved in this mess, either through the Raikage or the Hokage. Single quote. If so, then the former is more likely," Naruto said, hoping that it was the case. "But what could this guy want with me? Assistance of some sort, if I have to wager." Kyubi. He. Hello there, Yamanaka. So you're the one who allowed Naruto to connect with me. I suppose a show of gratitude is in order, but considering that we can only communicate verbally through him, you'll have to forgive me for not shaking your hand. Naruto could feel Ino's sudden fear at communicating with the Biju through him. After all, she did not know that he let the beast without any sort of hard mental rein to keep him at bay. So he decided to keep the conversation flowing and said, "Assistance with what?" "It could be that he has faced Madara," the Kyubi argued, his voice serious and grim, "and that one of my siblings which he is responsible for has been taken." "What does Madara Uchiha have to do with anything?" Ino asked, genuinely confused at what they were saying, considering that she had not been told of the recent news. "This Madara figure is most likely not the long-dead Uchiha, Ino," Naruto said to her. However, he was the one who controlled the Kyubi through some form of method similar to a Jinchuriki and sent him to Konoha, and he was also the one in charge of the mutated men that accompanied him. "How come we have not been told of this?" asked a new voice, a male, his voice familiar, calmer and more composed. He must have asked Ino to link through the communication line. Naruto then answered Shikamaru's question, "I just didn't have the time to tell you." "Sorry about that," he answered. "It must be because of Madara." The Kyubi seemed to be quite adamant with his theory. He had already sent his goons to retrieve Shumei, who's to say that he hadn't had his sights set on the others. "It is very likely Kit, and whatever he's planning to do with us is not good. I can attest to that." The motive that this man had, though eluded them, was something that made Kyubi anxious. "Then it's just a matter of time until they approach me," he said, referring to the Kumogakure shinobi. "And what will your answer be?" "Yes." The answer rang inside the ears of those who heard it, which was his advisors, Koharu and Homura, who were surprised by his adamance that was shown by how stern he looked as he crossed his arms. "I will request Naruto's assistance in finding the Raikage's brother." They were here for a discussion, and yet what they got was an answer that was given just 2 seconds after Homura opened up his mouth to give out the reasons why he shouldn't do so. "But you haven't heard what I have to say, Hiruzen," Homura said, as if pleading. "I am thinking that this figure, Madara Uchiha, is the one who unleashed the Kyubi onto the village a couple days back." Homura Hiruzen revealed to his advisors, and this information comes from the one whom he controlled. The beast himself. Homura and Koharu knew of Naruto's current status as the new Jinchuriki of the Kyubi. However, unlike Hiruzen, both of them were not willing to believe the information, not because they did not want to, but because the source was not someone they could trust. "It could be that the beast is lying, Hiruzen," Koharu argued, "that it attacked us out of its own volition." "Then how do you explain the mutated men?" Hiruzen asked. "They were created, that is for certain. A macabre creation that could only be rivaled by what we found in Orochimaru's hidden lab. And the ones that we encountered were strong. And killed many of our people." Before Homura and Koharu could respond, he continued, "This goes beyond the interest of our village. If he is targeting the Jinchuriki and their Biju, then it stands to reason that he is planning something big. Something terrorizing. It's never a good thing whenever a biju is involved in a situation, let alone a few of them. Quote. A few. Hiruzen then elaborated, another Jinchuriki was also attacked, but the would-be captors were incapacitated by Naruto. And she is here now, in Konoha. Usually, Danzo Shimura would have sent some sort of message that would inform them of this information. However, with the War Hawk and his root spies gone, Homura and Kaharu were genuinely surprised. And you weren't even bothered to tell us about this? Homura asked, somewhat offended. I only recently acquired the information. Hiruzen defended himself. Regardless of that, it is clear that this Madara Uchiha is seeking the Biju to fulfill a purpose. And by sending Naruto to aid the Raikage, we can either prevent him from doing whatever he wanted to do with his brother, or we can at least determine his intention. Hiruzen then finished it with saying, either way. We need to know what kind of game that this man is playing. Naruto had asked for his team through the previous mental conversation with Ino to gather at an unused training ground in Konoha for a quick meeting to discuss the new members to Yuya, Fu, along with Kakashi whom he had taken the liberty of inviting. It was a small training ground that was not designed for combat training, but for beginner genins to be trained by their Junin teachers. The team, as they liked to call themselves, were gathered in a circle, with Naruto having Yuya and Fu at his side, which amused Kiba a little bit for some reason. It had to do with how Satsuki looked slightly uncomfortable with his position. Kakashi was a few inches back from the gathering, crossing his arms and letting Naruto speak his piece. Everyone, before I go and speak about a new problematic matter at hand, I'd like to introduce the new members of our team first. Naruto stated before he turned to Yuya, this here, is Yuya. Her power is the ability to manipulate sound. Hi. I guess. Yuya greeted rather awkwardly, not really used to pleasant greetings. Hello. Said Ino as she nodded her way. Quote. Hey. Yuya replied back to the pale blonde in a slightly awkward way. Show us what you're capable of, Yuya. Kiba stated with a wide grin as he leaned his back against a tree with Akamaru lying on his hair. Everyone here knows everyone's powers are, so if you want to join. He ended the statement with a shrug. Yuya merely smirked as she raised her eyebrows, as if saying that she accepted his request and that she would show him in the most amusing way possible. A moment later, Kiba and Akamaru were turning their heads around to look for something, as if they had heard something that the others didn't. Whoa. What was that noise? Kiba exclaimed before he and Akamaru heard another sound vibration directed to their ears that made them fall and curling on the ground. Naruto merely looked at Yuya, who smirked rather mischievously at seeing Kiba's current condition. Then she said, as he said, I can manipulate sound. Any sound. Even if the sounds were above the frequency that humans are used to, and use it to my heart's content. After that little introduction, Tenten helped Kiba get up. He gave Yuya the stink eye, but nevertheless he said, that was good, I admit. Though under his breath of course. However, his voice came out louder than it actually was, and Kiba could only stare at Yuya, who must have done that in the first place. Quote. Very funny. Kiba said flatly as the others snickered at his expense. No need to relay the fact that you're impressed with me, dog boy. Yuya stated with a smile as she crossed her arms. Naruto then turned to the green-haired girl and said, anyway, moving on to Fu. Now Fu here has an ability somewhat similar to yours, Sakura. He said to the pink-haired girl, whose eyebrows were raised high at that statement. Really? She asked as she turned to the green-haired girl, you also have super strength. Well. Fu trailed off as she began to explain, I do. But I could also do this. She then summoned a green-colored aura and soon afterwards, she flew several meters above the others. Naruto told me that I can convert any energy that I received and then bring them out in another form that I wish. He told me that you are able to augment your physical ability, well, I can do that too. In addition to other applications. Sakura crossed her arms as she pouted, so I'm the only tank type that can't fly. How unfair. She muttered in a playfully indignant manner. Tank type? Fu asked as she turned to Naruto, as if asking him for elaboration. Those who can inflict the most bodily damage and the ones who can also soak them up as much as they can dish out. Naruto explained to Fu, there are several types of superhumans that Shiho there has classified: tank, weavers, psychics, augmented and hybrids. Tank is us. Naruto said as he pointed towards himself. Fu and Sakura, weavers or energy or element manipulators, which are Shikamaru, Tenten, Tayuya and Satsuki. Ino is psychic, which is exactly what it means. Shiho and Yugo-san are augmented, people whose senses and physical capability is above average human but not to the level of a tank. Kiba is a hybrid, people who can mimic the form of an animal to a degree and is presumed to have physical augmentations that are slightly above augmented, but still below tank. What is he then? Asked Tayuya as she pointed towards Kakashi, who had been content on stepping back a few feet and observe the others. Well, Kakashi began as he walked over to the others, mere observer no more, based on the types that he had explained, I suppose I am also a weaver. Kakashi then allowed his body to discharge the large amount of electricity that he kept inside, allowing him to look as if he was the conduit of storms with arcs of lightning coming out off of his skin and clothes. Yugo was visibly surprised by the fact that her fellow Anbu, even if he were a former one, was also a superhuman. You've hidden it quite well, Kakashi. She remarked. Kakashi smiled a bit as he shrugged. Well, my power can easily be controlled without any methods that would make one raise an eyebrow. I could restrain it mentally. Compared to your power, I suppose I got lucky. Yugo merely shook her head and said, lucky, right. Though she sounded as if she were a bit irritated and angry, her faint smile indicated that it was not like that. This is great, we now have 2 non-powerborn superhuman in our team. Shiho stated with a slight smile. Powerborn is a name that I have designated for people who got their power from birth, and non-powerborn are the type of superhuman like you and Yugo-san. She explained to those yet to be initiated and those who were familiar with the term. The purple-haired woman ruffled the little girl's head and said, ever the scientist, this one. She remarked about Shiho's proclivity in researches, crafting, and not to mention designating names. The word scientist made Satsuki remember something else. Oh yeah, Shiho, I almost forgot. I took a look at your design for Project Gear Up and. Then she smiled as she finished it with, let's just say that they work really well. At first, Shiho and the others were confused as to what the raven-haired girl meant, but then she used her power to summon a purple-colored version of what Shiho had designed, the armored gauntlets and boots with jets on their soles and palms respectively, and burst off flying upwards. Then, Satsuki added something else. She summoned a set of plates with thrusters that was designed to be worn on the back, and released out a stream of energy on it as well, keeping her afloat a few meters from the ground and looking down towards her friends. No way. Shiho exclaimed. Kya. It works. It works, it works, it works, it works. Yes. Granted, you used your power to boost yourself while I have to use another source, so that would mean that I have to add some extra features to it, but yes. It works. Ha ha ha. The rest of the team could only watch with amusement as Shiho pumped her fist and ran around the area of the empty training ground with her arms opened wide. She had always been the most expressive one of them all. Their moment came to an abrupt stop when an Anbu came and called for Kanzaki Naruto. The Hokage requests your presence. Naruto already knew what the old man wanted to tell him. However, he did not know whether or not the assumption that he and the Kyuubi made was true, and so, he was nevertheless, rendered uneasy by the development. But he would help the Raikage if Kyuubi was indeed right. He turned to the Anbu and said, please wait a second. I have something that I need to discuss with my friends. The Anbu nodded without too much protest. Ino. Link me up with everyone here besides the Anbu. Naruto said to the psychic. Ino nodded, and then he said to the others. Everyone. Besides introducing Fu, Tayuya and Kakashi, I'm also here to tell you about a figure calling himself Madara Uchiha. The integration has been completed, Madara-sama. HN. The Uchiha nodded towards Kabuto as they were walking on a hallway coated with steel, accompanied with one of the pale men who was clothed in some sort of skin-tight bodysuit. It took quite a while, didn't it? The Uchi Oni struggled well, but in the end, there was nothing that he could do against the torrent of energy within it. Indeed. Kabuto agreed as they came to an automatic steel door that required the Uchiha to place his hand to enter. The energy that we have extracted from Hachibi is a welcomed addition to the source. Then, the doors opened with a sound of pressurized air being released. And they entered a gigantic, circular room where at the center, there lies a massive sphere coated in solidified light that contained a large amount of energy acting in a state of constant flux, creating a constant wave of light that writhed and rotated around the interior of the hard light sphere as if it were a living aurora. All around them was the pale men that acted as the caretaker of the source. Their modifications were focused on their brain instead of their body so that they were able to have the aptitude to handle such a thing without any fatal mistakes. Kabuto and the Uchiha was not captivated in awe, for they had seen it beforehand. Though it was amazing, Kabuto had some other thing that he wanted to ask the Uchiha. The team that you have sent to retrieve the seven tails had gone missing, haven't they? Should you not be worried? I have no doubt that one of them survived. Said Madara, he is my right-hand man. The one I trusted most among these people. I know that he survived. As for the other, I doubt his survivability if he faced an adversary as strong as that child from Konoha. He had faced him before, and even with a Biju, he lost. I do not put too much hope in him. Ah, now there's someone that piqued Kabuto's interest so. The boy whom the Uchiha himself touted as being as strong as himself. The Uchiha's power was frightening enough, but to think that there were two people with a power of such magnitude in the world was terrifying. Do you believe that he was there when they were sent to retrieve the seven tails? Kabuto asked, do you think that they know of our plan? Considering that we are gathering Bijus, I suppose it is safe to assume that they have an idea of what we are planning. Even if it is just on the line of, planning something bad. Answered Madara, after all, weapons that they are, whenever a Biju or multitude of them are involved, it is universally accepted that it is a premonition of something horrible coming their way. Kabuto couldn't agree more. Then should we move the source to the safer location? Yes. But not at the moment. And certainly not a part of the essence that we have gathered from number 8. Madara answered, and for a moment, Kabuto wondered why. Then, his unsaid question was answered when he said, I am using this place as a bait for the hero of Konoha. The Raikage is there at the village right now, desperate to seek for an alliance after I soundly defeated him without using my full power, and here I will face that boy. Then he turned to Kabuto and said, I will give you and the others here a chance to escape. 7 hours from now, gather every available data that you have accumulated and go to the warp space station to go to base 00 and bring the source with you, understood? Understood. Kabuto said after a moment of contemplation, but why would you want to meet this person? This hero of Konoha who took the Kyuubi from you. Madara merely smiled as he said, I wish to meet him. Test his mettle. Other than that, retrieve the Kyuubi from him if at all possible. Single quote. If at all possible. Kabuto said. It stands to reason that if he is as powerful as me, then he is also capable of controlling pure energy with the grasp of his hands. Madara said, if it is not possible for me to take back the Kyuubi from him, then perhaps I will kill him. Hearing his choice of words, Kabuto couldn't help but ask, perhaps. Why the hesitance? All that Kabuto received from him was his enigmatic smile that Kabuto came to appreciate, if for how it piqued his curiosity so and how it could make his mind ponder the possibilities of what he desire. Orochimaru was not really that capable to be so mysterious, considering that he was one for theatricality. So I am to go with the Raikage tomorrow. Yes. Hiruzen had just confirmed Naruto's suspicion after he explained the situation with his brother. He was facing with Hiruzen and Tsunade on the office of the Hokage. So he was right. Ino said to Naruto, the Kyuubi was right. Hiruzen did not expect Naruto to bring his whole team however, including the new additions, Tayuya, Fu and Kakashi, the last of which really caught him by surprise, considering that he had never shown such symptoms and had hidden it very well. He also did not expect that all of them now knew about the Kyuubi and Madara Uchiha. Through Ino, Naruto had relayed the information to his teammates, and they received the news quite well, if they got a bit grim because of what they knew now. Is he the only one that this Raikage guy asked to accompany him? Kiba asked, I know that he's the one who fought the Kyuubi and everything, but that doesn't mean that we're not capable as well. He said indignantly. It's true. Shikamaru said, I'm assuming that this Raikage possessed some information regarding the location of his base, and if he wants Naruto to be the one to face him or to aid him in facing him, then he should have considered the mutated men that this figure is controlling. But maybe he doesn't know about the pale men. Shiho interjected, we don't know what exactly happened between them and what caused him to want Naruto's help, but there's a possibility that he just doesn't know about them and is thinking that Naruto alone would be a sufficient help. Then perhaps we should give this guy a piece of our mind. Sakura stated rather hotly. No. Kakashi said, prompting Sakura and the others to look at him, unless he requested any of you to accompany Naruto as well, he will be the only one to go. Unless, of course, if by giving him a piece of your mind, you wish to be included in the discussion. Which won't happen. Yugo answered, considering that this is more about this Madara Uchiha, this is also about improving the relationship between Kumogakure and Konoha, and that unless there is an intervention by the second party, we will not be included in the mission given by the Raikage. Besides that, there are still a lot of unknowns. Tenten said, providing her insight, like, we know that he's the one who unleashed the Kyuubi and the strange men on Konoha, but other than that and the possibility that he possessed superpowers as well if not just a really skilled, powerful and experienced shinobi, we know next to nothing about this guy. Which would mean that Raikage's decision to follow the lead that he possesses on this Madara Uchiha's location is not one that was made with his mind in the game. Tayuya pitched in, fuck, there's a lot of bad vibes ringing in my head after hearing what this mission is about. Still though, if this guy's the one who is seeking the Bijus, then he must be stopped, regardless of the Raikage's brother's status as a Jinchuriki like myself. Fu stated. I will admit that this mission sounds a bit foreboding, though. However, all this argument would lead to nothing if there were no conclusion, and Satsuki voiced it out loud, enough. She began, which silenced all the ones there. In the end, Naruto is the only one that can convince the Raikage to mobilize us or to let us stay idle. So what do you say, Naruto? What do you want us to do? Naruto was silent for a few seconds before he said, where is the Raikage staying at this moment, old man? Hiruzen raised his eyebrows in surprise before he said, at the Flaming Leaf Hotel, why? I'm going to speak to him. Getting to know the mission better, and then relay them through Ino. He turned towards his friends and said, we'll see if this mission encourages all of us to go or just me alone. Let us away, shall we? He said to the team. Hiruzen could barely hide his smile when the collection of people nodded his way and followed him as he exited the office. Tsunade, however, could not hide her mirth as she shook her head at the show that the blonde managed to show. If he were more charismatic, I would have mistaken their loyalty for indoctrination to a religion. The old monkey chuckled at Tsunade's quip before he took the paper that he had put down when Naruto and his group arrived. Tsunade had came before him moments before Naruto barged in with the whole group and asked questions that he readily answered. Tsunade had been rather set in giving him something that she had found about the superhumans from the data the medic nins before her have gathered a month ago when the team was first conceived. However, before that matter can be discussed, there was something else that Hiruzen wanted to know. How's the boy? Knowing who it was that Hiruzen was referring to, which was the comatose boy that is supposedly belonged to Root, Tsunade answered without delay, he's been treated well, I only needed to further what the other medic nins had already done. She answered, however, I think he will still be comatose for a while longer. I suggest not invading his mental barriers using the Yamanakas, his physical body is already weak as it is. Very well, continue giving him treatments, we still need to know what exactly happened. Hiruzen stated before he grabbed his glasses and turned to Tsunade's research notes regarding the superhumans, particularly on the words that she had underlined. So, returning to the matter at hand. Hiruzen muttered. There was silence at first as he read the notes. Then, as it became clearer and clearer, his eyes began to widen before he turned to Tsunade and asked, what made you come to this conclusion? The difference in how their chakra is exuded. Answered Tsunade. We are able to use complex techniques through the use of seals, whether from our hand formations or through drawing them with ink as the Uzumaki clan was capable of doing. Hand seals are mnemonic device, as what you have concluded with your observation of one Yugo Uzuki, and with enough power, training and habituating, some of us can use even the most complex of ninjutsu or genjutsu without the use of hand seals, though they might use them anyway because it helps them focus their chakra. This supports the theory of them being mere mnemonic devices. Then she crossed her arms and said, however, the superhumans' chakra affected their bodies differently because of their genes. Because of this they possess slightly augmented physical attributes in durability, strength, stamina etc., and these are the general powers that they possess by being one. And from what I've seen, the degree of their augmented physicality differs from each individual, with the possibility of one being 10 times stronger than the other. Their specialization, or their active powers, as I termed it, give credence to the notion that their body repurposes chakra in a slightly different way than we do. Instead of experience, they only need growth and practice to become stronger, and I think this is because the gene anomaly, or the X gene, which caused their chakra coils and their channels to be deeply ingrained within them, making them a bit different than the concept of chakra that we are familiar with. Deeply ingrained. Hiruzen asked. Yes. Tsunade said with a nod before she said, their bodies are not just channels for chakras to manifest as an element. They have become the embodiment of the energy itself, which manifests itself differently through each individual as the result of their genetic differences. They are derivations from us chakra-wielding shinobi. Mutations. Supposedly, it's fitting to call them mutants. After a moment of silence, Tsunade added, though I don't want to. While superhumans are a bit childish for a name to call themselves by, mutants felt wrong to be heard in my ears somehow, don't know why. In such a short time, Tsunade managed to determine such a conclusion. Once again, Hiruzen was reminded as to why she was known as the legendary medic Nin. Her understanding of human biology, chakra, and her deductive capability was remarkable. She had to be that way for her to be that well-known after all. I see. Very impressive, Tsunade. Hiruzen said to her, impressed with her finding and deduction. I just did what you told me to do, sensei. Tsunade replied, just like Jiraiya is doing right now. Has he reported anything yet? No. Not yet. Hiruzen answered with a shake of his head, he has yet to find any good intel on this Madara Uchiha. Give him time, espionage work is never easy. And considering the enigmatic figure that we seem to be facing, then it might take quite some time until we hear more from him. He then saw how Tsunade seemed to be worrying over her friend, and so he said, don't be so hard on yourself. Jiraiya is strong and capable of handling himself. And if he got himself forced in a combat situation with someone he could not beat, he would retreat. He might be a bit of a fool, but he's not that foolish. Tsunade merely smiled, and though it did not really reach her eyes, she remarked, considering that he almost get killed by me after he got caught peeping and still continuing that habit whenever he can, I don't think that he is as smart as you said he was. Hiruzen chuckled with a grimace, remembering the time when his most idiotic student could only smile as he had to bear with broken ribs, damaged organs and punctured lungs in the hospital, bedridden but not at all repentant. However, he acknowledged that Jiraiya had grown well. Hopefully, he wouldn't be stupid enough to not get the hell out of a troublesome situation. I could not be at peace. For every second that he spent here, his brother must be suffering in the hands of that despicable man. There is nothing that you can do, Raikage. That man. With how easily he defeated him, he had contemplated the idea of taking Madara to death along with him, as a last resort attack. Your brother is already dead. But the idea did not appeal to him, for he thought that he could do more to rescue his brother if he were alive. However, knowing what happened, he decided to not go without a substantial help. And that was when Mori's letter got to him. When he told him about the hero of Konoha who defeated the Kyuubi with no jutsu but the incredible abilities that he possessed and the so-called supermen that Konoha possessed, he needed them, especially the one who defeated the Kyuubi to help him find his brother. However, almost every member of Kumogakure's higher-ups did not want to follow what he wanted to do, believing that it would make Kumogakure look weak by asking for help and caving to the Hyuga clan head's demand. It took 2 extra days for them to agree and it took a bit more for him to be allowed to go, and though the chances that his brother was still alive was considerably slimmer than a few days past, he was not deterred and when he got into Konoha, he requested for the Superman to be brought with him for the mission in exchange for Kumo to give them Yugito ni to be taken care of by the Hyuga. B was a valuable member of Kumogakure. His skills and power were unparalleled by most of his colleagues in his village save for the Raikage himself, and he was regarded as a figure worthy of praise and love of the people of Kumo. His current disappearance troubled the village greatly, as was the possibility that his fate might have already been subjected to a horrible fate by the one who called himself Madara Uchiha. He hoped that the Hokage would agree and that the Superman would be willing to accompany him. Raikage-san. The voice did not sound familiar. It belonged to somebody that he did not know, a voice which he could not attach a face to in his mind, someone who went past through the securities that he had set as perimeters. He told them that he did not wish to be disturbed, so this must be either someone important or an intruder with hostile intentions. If he were the former, then he would have heard it from the Hokage. However, if it were the latter, then this person would not waste time calling him through the door and would have just burst in. A cautiously stood as he slowly walked towards the door. He extended his hand towards the knob, turned it 45 degrees clockwise and pulled, revealing none other than Naruto Kanzaki, the Superman whom he had been seeking. Raikage-san, Naruto Kanzaki, I believe that you had asked the old man for my help in retrieving your brother. Naruto said rather quickly to the slightly bigger man. Nodded and gruffly, he said, that I did. What is your business here? He asked of him. I am here to ask you about your brother's kidnapping. Naruto answered, you asked for my help, but depending on what the current situation is like, I could also bring along my friends to assist you if you want more help. The ones who defeated the strange pale men. Though not as known among outsiders from Konoha thanks to how enamored they were with how this young man handled the Kyuubi, they were regarded as exceptionally powerful, even if they were not to the scale that this Naruto was. Come inside. Said, and Naruto answered with a nod and entered the suite room that the Raikage had decided to stay in. The large man then sat on one chair, then he pointed to the chair across from him and said, sit, young man. Let us talk. Once again, Naruto nodded and took a seat. There was only silence for a few minutes, but then, broke it by saying, my brother, B, is a Jinchuriki of the Eight Tails. He revealed, he is very skilled with his Jinchuriki abilities, and I, even though I never said much about that particular thing to him, acknowledge him as my equal. Both in combat and in charismatic personality. Though his is a little more unorthodox compared to mine. He stated with a proud grin. He then crossed his arms and continued, in recent years, he had taken a liking in living outside of the borders of the village like a hermit. Being a Jinchuriki who is actually on a friendly terms with his Biju, I trust his capability to keep himself safe. Then, his expression went somber as he said, but he was not prepared for the Madara Uchiha. How powerful is this man? Naruto asked, his voice apprehensive. Very bloodied and battered, I could only watch helplessly as the man named Madara grasped the neck of his unconscious brother and lift him up as if he were a simple rag doll with just one hand. The area around them was destroyed. Once, this was a cliff near a lake, but now, it had become a part of the latter, leaving patches of lands that rose above the lower water level that Ayan, Madara, occupied. Like his father before, he had fallen in battle against a powerful enemy. The difference was that the adversary did not lose nor did they end up in a draw. He triumphed over him, his brother, and his men. This was a complete loss on his part. I could only watch as his brother was taken away by Madara. Seeing how the larger man crossed his arms and cast his head down so morosely gave Naruto an idea on how much he cared for his brother. After hearing what he said, Naruto couldn't help but to say, then shouldn't all of us come with you? With greater numbers, we can give you more advantage. Perhaps it could, perhaps it could not, however. I require one person only, and that is you. Not all the members of your team. Said, as to why, I will tell you this. Numbers mean nothing to him. And your comrades are not as strong as you, are they not? Then they will become a liability. You will need to stand your own ground while I rescue my brother. In other words, you are worried over my companion's well-being. Naruto asked. Not so much as worried or concerned of them as I am more concerned about the practicality of such decision. Said, correcting his assumption, if you insist on bringing another one of your supermen, then choose only one or two, preferably the second and or the third strongest. Do not bring all of them, it will only give you more people to worry about. In other circumstances, Naruto would be quite offended by the suggestion or implication that his friends were not considered strong. However, in this context, it means that this Madara is really strong. Isn't he? A nodded grimly, I would not ask for your help if it weren't for that. Your battle against Kyuubi has become quite a tale that has certainly spread across the countries. And quite frankly, your powers overshadow the others. If he is as resourceful as I am thinking, then it stands to reason that he is aware of you and how much of a threat you are should you oppose him. And that is why I want you to come. Both as a shock value and that I have high hopes in you. It was quite a hefty burden, being someone's hope. And the thought that he attracted the attention of everyone in the world, along with the one known as Madara, scared him somewhat. I'll be with you, you know, said the Kyuubi to Naruto, and should you choose, 2 of your friends will also come with you. You are not alone in this, you will face this with other people, those who are close to you. Naruto was silent for a few seconds before he nodded to A and said to him, I'll bring 2 of my teammates. Satsuki Uchiha and Sakura Haruno. They are strong, and capable of matching the Pale Men blow for blow with their powers. And Uchiha? Reikage asked, his eyebrows were raised, are you sure? Though I am certain that this man is not the legendary Uchiha that helped build this village before his betrayal, he is an Uchiha nevertheless, do you really want to bring her into this? He asked Naruto. Naruto nodded, I do. I want to bring her not because she would hesitate. But because I trust her, and I want to bring her along. I trust her with my life, Reikage, I have confidence in her ability. A nodded, rather pleased by Naruto's resolve and reason, then we are in agreement. He stated, we will meet at the gate first thing in the morning. My men have worked tirelessly to find a tip on the location of their base, and thanks to their hard work and determination to find my brother, tomorrow we will leave for the ruins of Uzushiogakure. Naruto's eyes widened slightly at the name of the location. The village hidden by the whirling tides, a name that had a similarity to the clan name of Uzumaki, quite possibly, the place where the clan originated. Then elaborated, I suppose it is rather ironic, a terrorist shinobi using the name of Konoha's most well-known traitor is using the location of one of the village's greatest ally in the past as his base. He remarked, but it is where we will go tomorrow, Kanzaki Naruto. Prepare yourself and the teammates who you will bring with you. The Reikage then waved his hand dismissively, now leave. Do what you must until tomorrow morning. He said, dismissing Naruto from his presence. Naruto stood up and nodded to the Reikage before he exited the hotel room. Whereupon he saw the still unconscious form of the guards that Ino had incapacitated from a remote location. So you'll be taking Satsuki and Sakura, huh? Ino asked through their mental link as he began to walk towards the hotel's entrance. I'll go and prepare myself, Naruto. Sakura said through their shared link. There was a silence for a short moment before she said to Ino, don't worry Ino, I'll be fine, I promise. Oh, do you want to go with the uniform? I've already made yours. Shiho said to the pink-haired girl. Sure, why not? Sakura said, and Naruto could imagine her smiling slightly when she asked that. You did a good job with creating Naruto and Satsuki's by the way, very sexy. Sakura. Satsuki's voice echoed through their mental link. Great. Okay then, I'll go and prepare things. Exclaimed Shiho before he felt her leaving at a fast pace. I'll go with her, said Yugo rather wearily, as if expecting that would happen. We'll go with you as well. Kiba said, referring to him and Tenten. Tenten wants to try out her uniform. Shiho said that it's also finished. Yup. Can't wait. See you Naruto. He felt the others leaving the mental link as their bodies were moving away. Then he heard Satsuki recomposing herself before she said, anyway, I will be ready whenever you need me Naruto. Thank you Satsuki, Sakura. Naruto said to both of them as he exited the hotel through the entrance and walked over to the cafe across from the hotel where they gathered. I really appreciate it. He said when he saw the pink-haired girl began to walk away to her home. Sakura merely nodded with a smile. Anything for you, Naruto. Besides, this Madara guy needs to be stopped sooner or later anyway. Better if it were the former right. I'll go inform my parents first though. I can just see their reaction. Well, see you next morning. Naruto nodded, and with that, the pink-haired girl left. Naruto then walked towards his other teammates and said to them, "So, any thoughts or questions?" He asked of them. "No. Your choice of companies is good, I have no problem with it." Shikamaru answered rather simply. "However, I do want you to exercise caution. For this man to earn Raikage's fear must mean that he is powerful." "I agree with him," Kakashi added. "I'm a bit worried for Sakura, considering what you're going to face, but I trust your judgment, Naruto." Ino stated evenly. "Just keep her safe. Though I now feel I didn't need to say that, I just have to." She added rather sheepishly. "Well, I have one," said Fu. "Why didn't you take me along? You said I'm as strong as Sakura, right? So why did you pick her and Satsuki? Not that I'm complaining, it's just doesn't seem fair as all." She added with a little pout. "Well, I chose Satsuki and Sakura because they're the strongest and the longest-serving member of this team. You, Tayuya and Kakashi still haven't acclimated to this just yet. Being superhuman and part of the team I mean. So I didn't choose you because I want you three to socialize a bit more. Especially you, Tayuya, remember what we talked about." Tayuya looked away slightly and grumbled, Yeah, socializing is important and all, I get it." At Naruto's stern look, she added, "I get it okay." "Really?" she said with a combination of slight exasperation and honesty in her voice. "Just take it one step at a time, don't rush yourself over nothing," Naruto said with an assuring smile. "That goes for you too, Fu." "Okay," she answered, rather dejected by how she didn't get to come with Naruto again. "Anyway, while we're gone, I suggest that you guys just go do anything you want, this doesn't have to make you overly worried. But with what the Raikage told us, I think we should be prepared, so Satsuki." "Yes," Satsuki asked it, how his voice turned serious. "I want us to spar for a bit. I saw the construct you made from Shiho's blueprint, let's test them out against me," explained Naruto. "I want to make sure that you're ready, is all." Though he tried to be calm, Satsuki could pick up some concern in his tone. What a set of Madara seemed to struck a chord in him. Though he knew that she was not weak, and she knew that he knew this, she recognized that he was worried over the mission, and of her. Though he trusted her enough to include her in the team that will go with the Raikage, she knew, as well as he did, that she was not that powerful. However, her power was versatile. And Naruto considered that as the key. Satsuki nodded, seeing where Naruto was going and accepted his offer, understood. She said as she stood up, "Where will we go?" In response, Naruto floated a bit, and Satsuki quickly responded by constructing the armor from Shiho's design, particularly the gauntlet, the boots and the jet plate on her back. She floated towards him, and then he said, "Training ground number 34. Follow me, Suki." Naruto left before Satsuki, due to him suddenly referring her with such an affectionate nickname. Wait a second," she said after she took a moment to recompose herself and flew towards Naruto, who was flying a bit slower than before. Kakashi chuckled at the show of affection that the two had, and Ino joined in shortly, the former because of how innocent they were before while Ino did so because of how flustered she was when he suddenly used the nickname. Fu pouted as her gaze went towards the direction that Naruto and Satsuki left towards while Tayuya's expression was a bit unreadable. Then, the redhead said, "Is the blonde shacking up with the Raven girl or something?" she asked out of curiosity. Her choice of words, unsurprisingly, earned her glares from the Nanabi Jinchuriki and Ino along with neutral but somewhat stern stares from Kakashi and Shikamaru. Just asking, is all. The first thing that Satsuki did when they landed on the training ground that consisted of a small clearing secluded by the forest that surrounded it was not to ask Naruto about the rules of engagement, how long the spar should take or what they were not supposed to do. Instead, she opted to ask, what's with the Suki? Naruto looked sheepish as he said, "Well, it's the abbreviation of your name. It's an affectionate nickname, for you. Do you not like it? If so, then I can just." No, I don't have a problem with it, I was just surprised, that's all," Satsuki assured him. There was an awkward silence that lasted for a second before she cleared her throat and said, "So, how should this spar go, do you think? Any rules, any limiters?" Well, first of all, I won't use my whole power, just 3/4 of it. Naruto stated, but I want you to give me all you have. All you can do, attack me as if your life depends on your victory. Satsuki nodded as she clad herself in full armor made out of her energy construct. 3/4 of his power was something that she and his friends had never experienced before, with the Kyuubi being the exception perhaps. Then, he surprised her even further when he got into a stance, with his hands balled into fists, his right one extended towards her and his left pulled back to his torso. His footing was solid and firm, and his gaze was serious. She reciprocated by preparing herself for a full-blown combat as well, mirroring his stance and locking onto his eyes, her arms at the ready, her knees provided a substantial support and she kept her breathing steady to make herself feel light, and not burdened by the restraints of fear. Naruto wanted her to think of him as an enemy, and that was what she would have to do. He wanted her to be prepared, this she understood and she would do as he said, acknowledging his goodwill and reciprocated kindly. Then, he attacked first. A punch directed towards her solar plexus, the trajectory was not hard to predict and so she responded accordingly by grabbing his arm and directed the motion of his body away from her by pushing his arm away and sidestepping to avoid the predicted trajectory of the attack that would have landed had she did not use the armored boots to create a burst of energy that allowed her to sidestep faster. Naruto let the redirection work for a second, flying away from Satsuki before he flew back towards her, one of his arms extended with his fist enclosed. Satsuki reacted by avoiding it, as at that moment, retaliating was not feasible, she needed to be used to the sheer speed of his flight first, which she was beginning to get, especially the pattern. It seemed that Naruto was doing this because he had a suspicion that Madara possessed similar set of powers to his. Or, barring that, he wanted to see how far she could really go when he let go of nearly all of his restraints that he had placed whenever he sparred against any of his physically weaker teammates. The only one that could nearly match him in sheer strength and durability was Sakura. Ino could surprise him with mental attack, Kiba could use his innate impeccable instinct that allowed him to sidestep his way from a danger, Tenten's energy could actually hurt him a bit, but she wasn't as fast as him and thus, considered weaker. It was the Weavers, as Shiho called them, that made Naruto stop and think. Tenten's version, though less versatile compared to Shikamaru or Satsuki, had a lot of potential, and he wondered whether or not the two of them possessed even more potential than Tenten, considering that their powers were equally versatile and volatile. Shikamaru's shadow, and Satsuki's light, were constructs of energy that could assume physical properties that could either protect them from harm or inflict destructive damage to those unfortunate enough to deserve them. Was there a limit to this kind of power? That was the question that Naruto pondered, and wished to know, starting with Satsuki. She created a pair of massive arms made out of her energy over her own combined with a purple-colored aura that made her appear as if she were wearing a gigantic humanoid suit over her energy armor. Naruto let himself be punched by the swing of the massive arm, to gauge the amount of force that she could exert. The answer was, quite a lot. In addition to using her energy construct, she also exploded the energy fist upon impact, and it allowed Naruto to be thrown for hundreds of meters away from the spot where the fist hit him, creating a trail of destruction along the way that uprooted trees and destroyed the dirt that he skidded along with. There was a moment where Satsuki just looked at what she did with mouth agape, as if having a hard time comprehending what just happened. And then she got frantic when the realization of what she just did hit her. Oh no. No no no. She yelled as she flew over to the direction where Naruto had been sent to. Concern for Naruto overtook her mind. She moved faster than she did before, and then she arrived at the place where Naruto was, and she saw him lying on his back with parts of his clothes torn due to her attack. He appeared unresponsive, and so she went to his side and checked. When she got close, Naruto suddenly turned to her. His face conveyed not anger, but surprise and elation despite the fact that half of his body was badly bruised, and then he said, "That was amazing." He stated it as a matter of fact with a bit of approval. "Was that your full power? You actually managed to hurt me a lot there." He asked as he began to stand up and his bruises began to heal themselves. "Why yeah, that was." Satsuki answered as Naruto began to walk closer, feeling a bit self-conscious thanks to what she just did. I used every last bit of my power that I'm capable of bringing out on that one attack because you told me to be serious. I'm so sorry. She apologized. Satsuki then felt his hand on her shoulder, a non-verbal sign of assurance, don't be. That was painful, I have to admit. But with that, I can be a bit more at ease in bringing you along. Naruto said, I know you're strong or at least able to become very powerful, but I just don't know how much you are capable now. A little bit of confirmation. She had understood that was the case. Hearing him giving the confirmation and how he trusted him was something that quite elated her. So, shall we continue? Satsuki asked. Let's go. Naruto answered before the two of them jumped a few feet backwards, setting up a distance between themselves as Naruto and Satsuki began to prepare for the inevitable clash. And then they did so, creating a beautiful spectacle of destruction that would later get them into a bit of a trouble since it would be a hell to clean up. However, one thing that they now knew was that Satsuki's power had a chance to stand on equal ground with Naruto. It was late in the afternoon, and Makoto was worried over the fact that Satsuki had yet to come home. Though she supposed that it was a bit overbearing of her to be so worried over her daughter who had become more or less an adult, or a young adult who was quite mature and not at all bratty, she still couldn't help it. She supposed that it was the product of what Itachi did. With no one else from her clan to talk to, she was occupying an empty house in an empty district that served as the village's ghost town. I wonder if we should move out, she thought as she looked over the interior of her house. This place no longer gives me a safe and secure feeling. Too much memories, one's better left forgotten. Though the dead were buried, they lived on in memory of those who once knew them. For Makoto, the memory of them was overbearing, and they acted as a reminder of what could have been, what could have happened had she, Itachi or Fugaku had acted differently. Too many reminders. Too many things that could not be completely forgotten. Yes, perhaps moving out would be a good idea, it had been more than a month after all. Though the district would stay as a living monument of the Uchiha and their past glory, she did not want to live in this place again, and there was a high chance that Satsuki would not object to the notion either. She sighed as she decided to go out and buy groceries, get some fresh outside air, clear her mind a bit. She stood up from the sofa, tied her hair into a ponytail, took her wallet and walked towards the door. Then as she was approaching the door, she heard a noise coming from upstairs. Her instinct kicked in as she realized that there was an intruder in the house. Her body stopped as she focused on listening to the sound of the intruder's movements upstairs, trying to gauge who it was and what they could possibly want. Though this person did not create any further noises, she could tell that they had entered the room that used to belong to Itachi's. With groceries forgotten, she took a kunai that she had placed on the nearby counter near the entrance and walked up the stairs quietly, intending to catch them by surprise. Who are you? Makoto thought, her expression wary and angry while her hand was tightly grasping the weapon, ready for whatever may come. When she arrived in front of the door, she slowly grabbed the handle and softly turned it so that it would not make too much noise. A small click was the cue for her to open up the door and enter. There, she saw that the intruder was already prepared for her, as she stood at the ready with her arms crossed and looking straight to her eyes. At this moment, Makoto thought that she had gone insane. The long red hair that reached to her knees, the purple eyes that signified her noble status, the fair skin, the pink lips. Her face was very disturbingly familiar, as it belonged to her supposedly deceased friend, her best friend. She wore a short-sleeved yellow kimono with black short skirts and black strapped sandals, and she was standing in front of her, effectively disproving what she had believed for the past 8 years. Quote. You're alive. Makoto muttered as her arms went slack at the sight, leaving her rather vulnerable if she were in a combat situation. The woman known as Kushina Uzumaki merely smiled and nodded, I am. This was a memory of the place that she would not soon forget or would want to forget. And that was certain.